side, let me just check that off here real fast.
Okay.
You should be good to go.
Okay. It's 5:58. We'll wait the 2 minutes.
Yes, you got it.
You got the clip. It's not going down. Just a little. Okay, the time is now 6 o'clock. We'll call the meeting to order. Approval of the agenda. Do I have a motion?
I move we approve the agenda.
I'll second.
I have a motion and a second. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Please rise for the pledge. Mr. Rudolphi, will you please lead us?
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Approval of the minutes for June 5th, 2024. Are there any questions or comments? Hearing none, do I have a motion?
I move we approve the minutes.
I'll second.
I have a motion and a second. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Next up is the public hearing on the adopted budget for 24-25. The board will vote to suspend the regular meeting to conduct a public hearing on the adopted budget for 24-25. I'll motion that we suspend the regular meeting. Do I have a second?
A second.
I have a motion and a second. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Meeting is suspended.
All right, good evening, President Reed, members of the board. Tonight, I am back in front of you presenting the adopted budget. This is much the same with the proposed budget, as we cannot statutorily increase the budget from the proposed. What I did add was some details into how the total budget amounts are broken down into categories at the board's request. So I have Mr. Hartman here to help me go through some of those detailed categories. But for a reminder, I did get a chance to update some of these slides, but the legislature did approve the K-12 budget Wednesday night, I believe. So I haven't had a chance. I'll give you guys the cliff notes. Some good news and some other not so good news for other state entities. I would say K-12 was relatively stayed flat or protected in some sense. So one, the AEL limit was exempted in that K-12 legislation, so we do not have to worry about that for another year. It was just a one-year exemption, so that seems to be the practice nowadays, that it's just going to be a constant inclusion in the budget and a conversation, and in some sense it's kind of used as a token or a lever in some negotiations, unfortunately, but it did get exempted, so that is positive. So that is allows the district to use their full budget capacity for the entirety of the fiscal year. So one win. The next budget bullet point, obviously I just said there's a K-12 budget approved. So the issue, what we're still approving tonight is preliminary budget forms. The AG's office has not officially had time or issued this final budget forms. So I may be back in front of the board in September, pending if those forms change a lot from what the board approves tonight. So I did include the 2% and 4.6% increase. Both are what were approved Wednesday night. I already had those included in the preliminary forms. So I knew I had a 99% kind of hint that those would be approved, and those were. So that's a positive, and one reason why I might not be back in September, because I think those were the two major changes to the budget. One thing with the capital, that 4.62%, that was previously enacted, and that was supposed to be a permanent fixture. What the legislature did this time was appropriate that for this fiscal 25, but as a one-time increase. So that will come back off in 26, unfortunately. So Ducey appropriated, it was a 3-year plan. The legislature then took that, they approved it for 25, but now they approved it as a one-time funding. So next year, capital will be decreasing by 4.26% at a minimum. So unfortunately, they give it and they take it away just as fast. So the concerns with the SFB were nullified. They did appropriate $200 million to SFB, which is a win. Several other state entities got slashed in massive cuts. The water infrastructure grant got completely annihilated. They took a lot of money from them. ADOT, they took a lot of money from ADOT. And so several other entities are where the legislature went for those cuts, but they kept the SFD Building Renewal Grant Program kind of whole, what we've expected in the last several years with that $200 million appropriation. So that's good news, and Chris will talk about how the district plans to use some of that grant funding for potential building needs going forward. I will note, though, I'm intimately familiar with SFE because I, myself, and other districts, I leverage that grant. I know right now there's $100 million in the hopper for projects that are either approved or ready to be approved. So that $200 million will go by fast, just because there's that much need out there in K-12 education for capital funding. So, but we will work hard to get as quickly as we can to get our applications in there and assessed for potential grant funding. So, on the M&O budget, again, this is the same slide from the proposed. The main points here are revolving around ADM, declining ADM, right? The M&O budget, it's a formula-controlled budget. Again, it's the main formula or multiplier in the formula is ADM. We are projecting 100 ADM decline. Again, unfortunately, we have to project for next year because we're budgeting on current year funding. Now, if we increase students or don't decline as much as what we're projecting, which we're projecting or budgeting for 100, we can reclaim that budget capacity when we do a budget revision. So we try to go worst case scenario, and then if we don't realize that much, then we're increasing our budget, right? If we don't go worst case scenario, the alternative is we get to a point where we have to make cuts to positions or things that we've obligated in this budget cycle. So we feel with Dr. J that 100 is probably our worst case scenario going to next year. And again, optimistic that it won't be that bad and we can increase our budget when we do a revision. So I mentioned already include the 2% increase into the preliminary budget forms. That was approved at the state level. So, and then we're looking at estimated carry forward ending this year and carrying forward into next year about 456,000. We won't know that true number until one, we pay off all our outstanding invoices and our obligations. The district has all the way until August 31st. We do still get several invoices for projects that were either done or completed in this fiscal year all the way through July and into August. So that is normal. Utilities are one. You typically get your utility bill well after the month in which it was the service was provided. So just keep that in mind. We won't know that true number until the annual financial report. So we take those two, what we revised, what the current revision of the M&O budget is currently, what we're proposing, and that's where I show a difference of 8.6% decline. Again, a lot of that attributed to ADM, right? That's the main formula. So we're hoping that's the worst case scenario. So looking in the detail of that $10,669,050, I'm gonna let Chris kind of go through a high level budget here.
Good evening, everyone. I want to thank Tyler and Dr. J for letting me be a part of this. I'm somewhere in that purgatory between high school principal and finance director, but I asked if I could join this. If we're looking at M&O, again, taking into account potentially up to 100 students drop, one thing that was important to me as a principal was some autonomy, subject to approval of my own school's budget, things I could spend on extracurricular classroom things, furniture, what have you. So we've given, when we balanced it last week, you can see the numbers there. Ms. Reichler will have almost 15,000, 14,800, 2,500 at Little Falcons. Dr. Wheeldryer, a little over 9,000, and then Ms. Pinto, 17,960. Virtual Academy is, like I said, online, and as a principal, all we needed really on that was the occasional hotspot for students that didn't have access to internet. I was told coming in, it was important to this board not to involve certified teachers in reduction in force. We did not do that, so you can see that roughly 81% of our budget, as with the lion's share, goes to salaries and benefits. So we're a little over 8 million there, or not a little over, 8,191. Utility costs have gone up. We based that on the rise in rates in the previous year, 650,000. Trust renewal insurance will be approximately between 387 and 390. We've allotted 7,500 to the DO for supplies and services, and then 5,000 for professional development, and then for contingencies, a little over 13,000. Substitutes, again, based on last year, I know we had a lot of subs at the high school, about 200,000 for all the sites. And then special education will come out of Medicaid. Didn't allot any M&O for that. I understand the board is against contracted services, as am I. However, the reality is I don't believe have any candidates applying. We have about 6 weeks until the start of school, so we certainly hope we don't have to contract out, but we did budget it in, just in case. And then 125,000 for facilities, supplies, repairs, roofing, chillers, tiles, things like that. 180,000 for tech, supplies and services. And that does include Fruth. And then transportation out of impact aid did not have money in M&O for that. And that brings us to the 10 million.
Do we have questions on this slide?
Are there questions from the board?
I do appreciate the breakdown. It's a little bit more closer to what I was looking for, I guess. The top numbers, where it's site-specific, I'd be interested to know how those numbers, how'd you come up with those numbers? And then is that considered like flexible spending for site-specific programs, or what would they be expected to spend that on?
So yeah, I brought this idea of having sites have a discretionary budget. One takes the administrative burden off of Kane and Chris to allow them to focus more on high-level items. So this is a formula that is pretty commonly used throughout districts. So it's $45, or sorry, excuse me, It's scaled, so elementary, it's $25 per student, middle 30, high school 40. And we base that off prior year ADM, because it's a hard number that we know where they finished at. It may be off from where they're currently at, but it's a good basis to start the conversation. Now we're talking M&O, so we're talking consumable supplies. And so the idea of this budget is for, right, copy paper, right? Stuff to function, to the operations of the school. Classroom supplies, right? It won't go far, which is why teachers often do wish lists, right, and ask parents. But if the site wanted to allocate maybe $100 per teacher to go to Office Depot to get some supplies, that would be where that would come from. In terms of, you mentioned instructional software, like kind of programming. If it's a district-wide function, that would come from the district kind of bucket. So we'd be looking at that. And if it's programmed, it's technically, if it's a software, it's a capital item. So we'll show you where that's budgeted on the capital side. That wouldn't come from this side.
The one that came to mind was the science program that we're considering for the elementary. Like, since that's kind of site-specific, is that something, or is that still a capital expense?
I think this budget would be hard-pressed to fund some of those initiatives, so we'd be looking at the district budget in terms of software and what we want to support as a district for those specific programs.
Well, and then where does this leave us with, I know John mentioned at one of the meetings that, is it Blick supplies that we just, at the warehouse, I guess there's a ton of that, and he's like, I keep seeing Blick orders, and every time I see it, I'm like, why don't they check to see if we have that stuff? How are we gonna deal with that?
That's related to grant funding, correct?
That was just for the arts consumable grant.
Yeah,
but-
that was a grant that we did, and those resources are coming from that, so that's a different bucket. Yeah.
But I think to your point, I think Chris can work with the warehouse to make sure they're levying those supplies that are at the warehouse currently before they go and order stuff. So while we're allocating money to the sites, the ultimate approval, it would still function through Chris in terms of what they're requesting. And so Chris can be a part of that conversation, say, hey, this item we have at the warehouse, right? You don't need to order this, and kind of return that requisition or return that PO.
So there will be oversight before things go through?
Absolutely,
Yeah, it starts though with the principal, so if when I was high school principal, you give me 17,960, I have some decisions to make as a site leader. I can give each department a portion of that and say, here you go. Or I can say, come to me with concerns, questions, ideas of things that you need, and we'll talk through it. I chose to do it always as one lump sum, you come talk to me. Then I could say, well, have you thought about going to Golden Eagle for this? Have you thought about, a PTO possibly for this? And then if there was no other option, then I'd say, okay, as a department, can you all, you can't have all the money, so you good with this for this year, and you work that out. But it does give the principal some autonomy to push an initiative or try to do something that they're passionate about, and that gives them a little bit of funding to do it. But that's not going to go very far. I'm just going to say it goes
Well, I'll be
fast.
honest, I think it's nice to have admin and sites actually closer to the money, because then they will see how not far almost $18,000 goes, and it tends to make everyone tighten things up a little bit when they see that, so.
What
It's
about
not against breaking it
the
down
site
that way.
council, in each bill, is that coming from this too?
Yeah, so site council should be approving purchases, especially out of tax credit and things of that nature. So when I ran my site councils, I always brought to them, these are purchases we're going to be looking to utilize. Sometimes we might do, a bunch at the beginning of the year or some at the end of the year. But that's definitely something that the principals should be doing in site council, is making sure there's oversight there with that committee, which should include obviously parents, community, staff, and students as well.
I want to be clear though, that this is in addition to that tax credit and auxiliaries
Right.
fund,
Oh,
so
yeah.
yeah.
And then with the transportation, you mentioned something about impact aid. What exactly was that?
Yeah, so during the budget process between me, Craig, and Chris, we looking at this, right, when you can't really change salaries and benefits, we've already obligated those contracts and those are said and done. You can't change utilities, those prices are what they are. Insurance you can't touch. you're really looking at not a lot of discretionary options. So one option this district does have privy to is some of the cash funds. One cash fund you do have of impact aid because of your basically high.
Can you explain what impact aid is?
Yeah, because you service a lot of students on the reservation, there's no tax base for those individuals. And so as Fountain Hills is basically from the federal government, they are compensated for basically that lack of tax revenue for those students. So the district is privy to around $500,000 annually. And so utilizing, now we're trying to get creative because we are having some budget constraints at M&O. So we're utilizing some of these cash funds that essentially the district has availability to use to essentially, we're not increasing programs, but unfortunately we are just sustaining some of the needs. And one of those is with transportation, as they're completely eligible because we do transport those students, and so that is a
Qualifies.
Yeah.
That impacted, you said it's cash controlled? Is that what you said? Or
Yeah, so it's
cash
not
fund?
budget derived, so essentially what we bring in about $500,000 a year, so if you don't spend that, then that would carry over, right?
And is it kind of not assigned to either M&O or capital, or is it assigned to
Correct.
one?
It's interchangeable,
Okay.
and you'll see us use it in the capital budget as well for transportation, so.
Okay.
But there's stipulations on what you can use it for, because it's a federal.
Yeah, it has to be tied to
Right.
that purpose.
Can you also explain how transportation works with the miles and that it's not, like, I know that we see a lot on the, on our payables that, we're paying for gas and stuff like that, but we also file transportation reports, right, for reimbursements, so.
Yeah, so there is the state does provide funding for transportation, for districts providing transportation. There's a formula between a half mile and a mile, you get so many dollars per mile, and then a mile and beyond, it's another dollar amount per mile. And so, John and now Ray, will be filing, every year you have to do an annual inventory report, and then you have to do a mileage report, essentially submit up how many miles you drove, how many miles each bus drove, and then the district there's a formula for that, is then it's added to the M&O budget, it's not a separate budget, it's compensated for that transportation.
Because it's reimbursed, so it's not, it's
Yeah,
not.
and it's based on the budget cycle, so it's basically concurrent with the M&O budget, right? As you transport the students, then you report at the students, and you get funded for those students, so.
But we still take a loss on the transportation side.
Yeah, I mean, ultimately, you're still not covering the cost.
Right, it's not self-sustaining.
Yeah,
And the area.
It's a cost of public education, though, that's part of it.
Well, the area that I had John run some cost numbers, and the area that we're having the most challenge with is our EVIT transportation. And it went significantly up, according to his numbers, from last year to this year. Part of that is, I think, just the overall cost of gas and transportation. But also, we have a lot of kids taking EVIT classes, which we definitely do. But one of the areas that's a struggle is you have some kids going to the Power campus, you have some kids going to the main campus, you have some kids going to another campus. And so each one of those we're driving twice a day. And so that was our biggest losses in, I guess, and again, they can answer if it's what the loss is, but the two highest areas that we really struggled with was EVIT and then athletics. Athletics was $60,000 in transportation costs just for athletics
the
alone.
transportation, in terms of athletic transportation, that is not reported on that state report.
So that's not part of our refund.
So that is why typically districts charge tax credit, right, to kind of supplement some of those costs. But unfortunately, sometimes with an aging fleet, sometimes in not only just the use of the vehicle, but when you have an aging fleet, such as yours and an older fleet, the repairs and some of the miles on those buses, they require more repairs, and it's just a difficult situation that many districts are in. You're not the only one, and so.
And we have I believe it's the highest percent of students going to EBIT next year that I've seen in the years I've been here, where we may hit 25% of our total population at EBIT. We'll see what our final, student count is, but it's a good number of kids, and the trimester has helped tremendously with that. In fact, almost 80% of them are going in the morning now, which is a total flip from 3 or 4 years ago where everyone went in the afternoon. So it's a good thing, but it's also costing us. So just something to think about.
Going back just for a quick question on the impact day. When was it that everything was due? All the paperwork and everything?
Krista takes care of that very, very meticulously.
Well, that's what I thought.
And we make sure everything's done and on time. And a lot of the grant funding we get, we've been talking a lot about our Native American Parent Committee we've created.
Yeah.
So a lot of the grants that we're doing are now running through feedback and, consultation with tribal members to make sure
Yeah.
that we're doing, we're prioritizing what they would like us to. So I would say that is a very good strength of Krista. She's done a great job with the impact aid submissions.
And I went to the leadership conference a week ago, and they had a speaker on impact day. And I also got a number of somebody that deals with it in the Department of Fed.
Mhm.
So if we need to talk to her, because it was very interesting. They said in one school district, somebody got fired, superintendent, because they didn't put the paperwork in time. Because you're talking about getting like $1 million, so imagine
Yeah,
if all of a sudden you don't get it. So-
We watch that one very close.
Yeah, that's a
And
good
I will
one.
say,
I
there,
watch it very close.
Yes.
I don't want to be fired.
there's some additional funding though that we don't receive that we're going to go and try to do this year. I want to say it's Johnson O'Malley, is that correct?
Yeah.
I was going to
So,
ask about that one
yeah.
because it doesn't reflect on this past year's budget, but it's been one that I've seen in previous years. Did we just not apply, or what happened with that?
Since I've been here, that has not been something, it was not something that was in place when I arrived. It is something that we've talked about with our Native American Parent Committee about doing applications and funding for. So we're in process. We'll give you an update when we get an idea of where we're at with it and what we can expect as far as funding. But we're already on top of that one.
Okay, because that one, I know it was in place before, because I remember it was a pretty big number, and I had looked into what it was specifically tied to. Because anytime a grant's that big, obviously you want to use
Yeah,
it if you
it's
can.
definitely something that we have discussed and are in the process of, yeah.
I have a question too.
Oh, go ahead.
So a question on one of the items there, just to clarify in my mind, so I make sure I understand the insurance. So is that liability and
Yeah,
property
property
damage?
casualty liability, yeah.
Is that a state program, or is there any competition involved since it's such a large number?
The trust is pretty much the main agency that provides property casualty and liability insurance for Arizona school districts. They're an insurance company basically specifically for Arizona school insurance. I've actually competitively bid them out a couple times in my district. They don't come close to what they offer in terms of services. They're very niche and very supportive for K-12, like prepaid legal. Kane calls an attorney, right, as he should. That is part of their package. No other insurance carrier has that. That's an added on. So there's a number of different benefits to that, and not only do those services provide some additional add-on reasons why districts choose them, they are competitively priced out in the market too. So yeah, they're 95% of school districts in the state of Arizona are with the trust. So yeah, you may think monopoly, but they actually leverage that to put money back into schools. There's a number of different programs to get credit back. If you attend conferences, if you do certain trainings on forklift training or CDL trainings, like they're pretty niche to school districts, and they're very supportive. So.
And Ray just went to training on transportation and came back with a
free.
21 point bulleted list of things he wanted to talk to us about today. So, and Ray's
That was a free
doing
training
already.
by the trust.
Yeah, he's doing a great job. So that, and I would just say the prepaid legal, we use 100% of that every year. So I definitely use that because, again, it's a second opinion. Sometimes I just don't know the answer. And I will say, not only when it's just a general question, but we use a lot for SPED questions as well. And they represent us if someone, were to put in a complaint at the state level against the district. They represent us, and they've done a really good job of that to make sure that we're compliant, we're doing what we need to do. So I do agree that the trust has been a great partner, and it would be really hard to work. I'm sure there might be somebody else, but they do a great job. It'd be hard to work without them.
Okay. I also had a couple questions about specific line items. I don't know if this is the time to ask them, or?
On the budget forms themselves?
Yeah, the stuff in our packet here. So one of them is on page 1 of 8 of the M&O budget. So it's account 2500 central services. That went from an FTE of 5 to 10. So just wondering with the clarification of what exactly is central services and why is it doubling for this budget year?
Yeah, so that's a lot of your office staff and like kind of finance. You got Val, Tammy, Krista. So essentially every year we kind of reconcile that FTE. We did move a lot, so that is strictly M&O, that page 1.
Right.
Just keep that in mind. As you kind of saw here, we moved a lot of transportation staff out of M&O. You'll see their budget is 0. On
That was my other question.
Yeah.
Account 400, it went from 17 FTEs to 0, 1.1 million to 0.
So all impact aid, all transportation is going to be funded by impact aid next year. But it's just reconciling those FTEs to whether they're grant funded or M&O funded. And so this year we leveraged a lot of cash funds, or what we're proposing is leveraging a lot of cash funds to pick up positions, but some are coming back into the M&O budget.
Okay. And the other one is on capital expenditures. Can I ask that question at this point too?
Sure.
So furniture and equipment. So last year it was 500,000, and this year it's down, but it's still 350,000. So I'm just kind of curious as to any more specifics of what the 350,000 is for.
Yeah,
Still a
so
lot
on the
of money.
budget forms, it doesn't get as specific as what we'll get into today, but
Okay.
furniture and equipment can revolve. It's in the USFR, it basically alludes to a laundry list of things. So it can include equipment and transportation maintenance, also classroom equipment. So that decrease in budget is just how we're balancing our budget with what you'll see on the next slide, the decrease in capital funding. So it's just bringing down that allocation. The specifics on each group is what Chris will cover in a second, but essentially you'll see across the board, the budget's decreasing in several areas.
And the spending of that 350,000, is that subject to approval by
Yeah, so yeah,
Dr. J, or?
No, so what we're proposing is budgeted expenses. All expenditures still, whether they're next to 100,000, will still come back to the board.
Okay.
Yeah,
Yeah,
so
they still go through the procurement process, but I think what you're asking is why it's still 350. That
Well,
sounds
it's
a
still
little
a
bit
substantial,
high.
I imagine last year is because of McDowell Mountain and
Consolidation
all
and all
that
of
stuff,
that.
and it's still 350,000 is a lot of money.
Yeah, so I don't think
Yeah.
he was asking about the decrease as much as he was asking about the big number that's still
yeah, what
there.
I'm trying to explain is that big number incorporates transportation maintenance, right? A compressor is considered capital.
It's considered furniture?
It's furniture and equipment.
Furniture and
Oh,
equipment.
equipment.
And that's
Okay.
that's what, unfortunate, the budget reform, they don't get that detailed, so they use this broad term, furniture and equipment, but that's why
Like
I'm just trying to.
laptops and stuff and all
So
of
any
that?
hard
Hard
stuff.
physical item, if you,
Okay.
air conditioner on the, yeah, so like that, you're still
Water
gonna have
heaters.
a number of expenses.
That 350 is gonna go super fast. I mean,
Okay.
you're, like, just, if you have something major break down, it's coming out of that account, and you multiply that by 4 schools, and then just the amount of things that pop up. So
But if we're lucky, we may not have to spend it.
we're trying not to,
Right,
obviously,
that's anticipated,
Right.
again,
Got
all
it.
expenditures, actual expenditures will come back to the board, in excess of 100,000, and then you'll see them all on vouchers themselves as well, so.
Okay.
But we do have to try to plan, and so, it's hard to anticipate a lot of things, which, again, you'll see in a second, so.
Yeah. That's all I have.
All right, we'll go to capital here. So again, I presented this slide last week, it was a couple weeks ago. Again, the current budget, how it is revised right now, the capital budget's at $4 million. Again, a lot of that money was appropriated to the consolidation. The one note, again, capital is calculated on prior year ADM, so some of those ADM losses take a year to catch up to the capital budget, which is nice because it allows us to plan for those decreases. Like I said, I did include the 4.62%. The one thing I didn't think it was going to happen is that we're going to have to be taking it out next year because it was appropriated as one-time funding. So I will make that note when we present the 26 budget. And then the estimated budget balance carry forward of $1 million. That is a number that we are holding for contingency purposes, and you'll see that continued into this FY25 budget detail. So revised to propose a decrease of 55%. Again, a lot of those expenses were related to the consolidation efforts.
Tyler, do you have any idea what it was in 22, 23? Was it close to the?
About 4.3 million off the top of my head.
Oh, it was also high?
Yeah.
Okay.
That was the first year the capital override expired, and I think when in discussing those conversations with the board, there was kind of no plan, which is why we came up with that plan for consolidation. All right, I'm gonna let Chris go through the.
Oh, one last question. So
Yeah.
if I'm understanding correctly, next year, we're gonna see a pretty big drop if that 100 decrease, if the 100 student loss is accurate?
That's
We'll
correct,
see a
yeah, so
really big cut.
this budget is always a year behind the M&O. So, like I said, I highlighted that first bullet, we're using FY23's ADM, which you can see it's quite a bit higher than what we're on the M&O side. So, yeah, we'll calculate that in, and so yeah, we'll see a decrease in the annual appropriation, which kind of segues to this next slide, but I'm gonna cheat a little. On the far bottom, you'll see DAA budget capacity, that's 715, that's your appropriation from the formula. Straight formula, students times the capital weight, that's your capital budget annually right now as your ADM stands. And then you see your budget balance carry forward just a little bit over $1 million, and that's how you get to the 1.8 million. But I'll let Chris go through the details here.
Thanks again. So for capital, for the district office, 8,000. For textbook adoption at the elementary school, again, 65. Supplemental curriculum, 95.5, and then we move into IT, district-wide tech equipment, computers, desktops, laptops, what have you, 25,000, and then for software, power school, all that, 135. Maintenance and construction, 350,000 roughly, and then 5,000 for grounds. And then we met like Dr. J said, we met with Ray today. It was a great meeting. He had his list. 75,000 for equipment. And then going on prior year ADM, $45 per student. You see the breakdown of the of elementary school, middle school, high school, and then the athletic budget, 5,000. And then, like Tyler mentioned before, the contingency of $1 million. And then budget capacity for fiscal 25, like we explained before, carryover brings it to 1.8.
I just want to add, the 5,000 for district athletics is very, very low, but it's on purpose. The reason for that is, the last couple years with, going back before my time, the district has been picking up a lot of expenses on capital. And part of that is, multiple different finance directors. So that's part of the issue. So a lot of those accounts have really grown if you look at, like when you see your student activity accounts. And so I've explained to the coaches and to Evelyn that they really need to, for the next couple of years, they need to spend that down. And only come to us if there's like I'll give you an example. Say football had 20 helmets fail concussion testing and they have to have them, then yes, the district's gonna have to step in and take care of that. Fortunately, they have 20-some thousand in their account, they can do it themselves. So what we're telling them is you're gonna have to spend down some of those accounts. Now, again, that's all student-led, right? So students don't want to spend that money, then you can't. So we're asking them to look at what can you spend your money on, how can you help the district with some of those athletic funds, do it the right way, and then whatever comes back to us, we'll do our best to help, but we're really trying to reduce that athletic budget overall because they've had some spending over the last couple of years, okay? The other one is the contingency we've had since I've been here, a set number that we don't go below, and that's our $1 million of savings. So that's, if something major were to happen, say the chiller at the high school went out, a major purchase, that's there for those types of things. So we just kind of look at that number we really look at it as 814, and just, that million's there for savings, okay?
And does that get interest, the million?
Yes, I can answer this. So M&O does not, M&O gains interest of county treasurer, but you cannot capture that in your
Right.
budget capacity.
Yeah.
Capital, you can.
Okay. that's
So capital does accrue interest, and you can capture that every time you do a budget revision, so.
And one thing I like that you said that the athletics, there's so much money they should use it. Another place where I see tons of money is in the art department. It's like, it's really high,
Well,
what they have.
Yeah, we do have a lot of tax credit money right now, but it's hard to use. So it has to be extracurricular, it has to be beyond the school day. And in this town, having an art background, we get a lot of tax credits for art, and and sometimes we have more than we possibly need. So it's more of messaging of, it helps us the most when you donate to the general fund, so we can utilize it, but some people do want it to go to a specific thing, and we want to be able to honor that. So Chris, one of the things I challenged Chris with immediately the first time we met is, we went through all those accounts, and I went through them all with Evelyn, and I've said, look, these are where these accounts are, so uniforms, warm-up gear, things that the kids really like to purchase, have them, find out what's a priority for them and their organization, and do the minutes and bring those types of purchases forward. But the district's gonna have to take a few years off of purchasing uniforms and things of that nature.
And we haven't used any of the adjacent ways money, because it's the same from last year.
That's correct, yeah. So there hasn't been any eligible adjacent waste projects in this current year expended. So the reason it's included in capital is typically that's when it's associated with any sort of capital renovation with sidewalks, public right-of-ways, and stuff like that. So if the opportunity comes about where we do a project that's eligible, we'll try to utilize those funds. But yeah, it's going to carry over as long as you can spend it.
With athletics, I know that it's high hopes to think that it could be self-sustaining, but what happens with the fees that people pay, and does that go into its own account, and is that where this is budgeted from, or does that go into like the general budget and then we?
I will let him speak to that, but I will say, we're not trying to say that this is gonna be self-sufficient. What we're saying is the last few years, I don't think accounts are being used for what they should be used for. And that's just something that needs to be corrected, and it's something that I've been challenging them starting last year to start doing this.
Yeah, I agree. I think it needs to move more towards
Yeah,
being
but
self-sustaining,
as
even
you
though I
saw,
don't think that will happen.
there was a lot of catch-up work to do, and you were seeing reports come in that we're trying to clean up. And so now that we've cleaned everything up, we're now seeing that those numbers are real, and now Evelyn has access to those, which is something she didn't really have in the past. As far as the gate receipts and those types of things and fees, if you want to speak to that, Tyler.
Hold on before you do. I just want to clarify, when you said that they weren't being used the way they should be used, they weren't
Well,
being used inappropriately.
no, correct.
They weren't, the kids like to sit on the money.
Yes.
And
Well,
hope
and-
that the district will pay for it, so.
Coaches will come
Yeah.
and say, I need
Right,
25
so
basketballs.
I just want to clarify that before
Yes.
it comes out that athletics has misspent money.
No,
They didn't
no.
misspend anything, they
No.
just haven't spent it
Yes,
yet.
Yeah, no,
it's-
I understood it that
they-
way, but I do
I know,
think,
but
I
they
honestly
don't.
think, yeah, I honestly think that it's good to give the students or the athletes an opportunity to understand that responsibility where, you know, if you want these things, it's nice to be able to earn your money and be able to afford what you
Yeah,
want.
and it's not just those accounts, it's also their tax credit accounts. So their tax credit accounts have grown over the years, and a lot of times, like in the past, some of those tax credits were used for, a variety of different things I remember when I was principal. So we just, with cleaning all these, everything's clean now, policies and procedures have been changed, things from the audit have been cleaned up. Now we're rolling into very specific details, very specific guidelines. I'm just saying that instead of the district using capital to pay for 25 basketballs, there's money in the basketball accounts that I think they can find a way to, if it's appropriate to do. If not, then the district picks it up.
So Tyler, can you explain where, like, when people pay their athletic fees, the gate fees, where those things go? And I know with athletic fees, some of them are designated tax credit and athletic fees, so.
Yeah, so this 5,000 is intended to supplement and support those programs. Now that when parents are involved in those, right, and they have that fee, that goes into a cash controlled fund. Craig brings forth those reports, like King mentioned, we've been working very hard and diligently on to clean those up. And I think part of our effort, and you can see it here too, is with allocating site budgets, is to get not only those budgets that we're presenting to the board here, but get those also down to the sites. So those coaches, those site sponsors or the club sponsors are aware of where they're standing so they can make those decisions about their finances, right? I think that was some of the missing piece, and some of the things we've been working on for, ever since I started, and it's almost been 3 years now. We worked up, and now we're really getting down and trying to be as efficient as possible with some of these accounts. So those accounts go to a cash controlled fund. They are maintained at the site level. Those are not district funds. The district does not really budget for those. We don't. All we do is maintain those and account for those. And then our obligation is to just essentially make sure when they do submit a request for approval, make sure that they're being spent appropriately, they're coded appropriately, and then we approve them. But they are all maintained at the site in cash-controlled funds that are designated to specific purposes, such as athletics, music, band. And all we do, our responsibility is to account for them, and again, to make sure that when they're spent on eligible purchases. So extracurricular, for example, can't be expended to supplement the classroom. It can only be expended for before and after school. So.
Okay, perfect. I just wanted to make sure, so this was just from our capital budget.
Yeah, there's been conversations, right,
Support
talking
and encourage.
elementary athletics. So some of those things are going to need some help to get started. So again, that's where that little bit of money is intended to help. So
Very little.
yeah, but the goal is really for those programs to be self-sustaining and try to, maybe it takes 2 years to get new uniforms, right? But then now they know where they're standing with their budget and how much they need to raise.
Will each site receive like a monthly report showing what they've spent out of their budget?
That is our goal this year. I think we're in a place.
So can I?
Go ahead.
So this is where my being at the site, I think, helps. We have a plan meeting with, coaches, principals, teachers, explaining this whole process. And, they'll be able to see the countdown, where they're at, whenever they want, really. As soon as Val processes everything, they'll get I don't want to put a time frame on it, but they'll be able to see, sometimes it might be every 2 weeks or following week, whatever. And they can keep track on their own too, but I'll be able to show them where they're at. But what we've never had at the site level really is the finance person coming and talking to us about all this, so I think it'll help with some of the not disconnect between the sites and the DO, but it'll be all transparent. So
I've asked Chris to meet with Evelyn at least, starting out, twice a month, maybe move to once a month, just to make sure she's clear on things. And then we do this at principal meetings. We'll have a finance part of that. And then I've asked Evelyn to have monthly coaches meetings this year, not just about that, but just on general things in athletics altogether. So I think that's the hard part for her has been, for the 3 or 4 years she's been here, it's been hard to know what's available. And this past year she's had that, and that's helped her. And so now moving forward, it will be very specific and easy to follow.
Yeah, and being at the site, I certainly heard her frustrations with that. So a lot of which were justified, let me be clear, and being at the other sites as well. So I think I can improve on a lot of the site leaders' frustrations with this transparency.
Dr. Akowski, did you have a question?
Yeah, on the district-wide software, is that a outright purchase or it's a yearly subscription, so it's an ongoing expense that will probably go up in cost?
Yeah, there's multiple items in there, right? I think you mentioned your Power School, your SIS system, your student information system, that kind of come up to that total. And those are all typically on yearly contracts. I don't think there's any multi-year contracts in that.
Okay.
We've avoided multi-year. Canvas, Power School, Remind, for school safety. Some of those things are what we're talking about that are yearly. Some we used 1 or 2 for consolidation. We've cut those for next year because we don't need them anymore. So we've cut back PLP almost completely down to nothing. Chris is still finalizing what we're going to do with credit recovery between PLP and a couple other companies, and once we make a final decision on that, but we've really cut back. I mean, when I got here, just so you know, PLP, when I arrived, was $190,000 a year, and our budget is what for this year?
135.
135. So that was just one program. That didn't include Power School, so we've really cut back a lot, but there are a few programs that teachers and students just have to have, and that's what's included here. There's really nothing left to cut.
Was Power School when you were going to cut, or no?
No, we have to have a student information system, and we've invested so much into Power. Switching SIS is, as much as I would love to have that conversation, it's a multi-year it can be a real mess. So we've done some things with Power School that we're adding some functionality to it this year that'll hopefully make reports easier to run. We have more trainings scheduled than we've had in the past. Angie's gotten really strong in her knowledge of Power School, being able to train principals and staff. Kim Garvin's strong in that area. So, we need to stick with it at this time and see in a year or so how it's working for us. But there's not a lot left to cut in that budget, just so you know.
And PLP was primarily used, it came during COVID
Yeah.
because we had so many kids online.
Yeah.
And we needed to offer options for them since we weren't having in-person classes. So it was either that or lose our kids to other programs. So.
One last question. The contingency fiscal year 2025, it shows and then it shows expenses. Is that because it's showing down at the next area for the total as the estimated budget carry forward? And so what we're looking at adding to that is 95,000? Is that what?
No, so that number on the bottom is what we're carrying forward from this year into next year. So it's just over $1 million.
Mm-hmm.
What we're budgeting for is $1 million for next year.
Okay.
So we're carrying forward what I'm estimating. Again, I'm trying to anticipate all our expenditures from now until August 30th, making sure all our liabilities are paid. But I'm anticipating us carrying over $1,095,000, and that's what that bottom number shows. So you add that plus the budget capacity, the state formulated budget, which is the $715,000. That gives you your total capital budget for next year. And what we're budgeting for contingency is just $1 million. So those are 2 different numbers.
Okay.
Are there any other questions from the board? Okay, hearing none, this is a public meeting, and so if there's anyone in the audience.
I thought he was going to cover this last one. Are we done?
Oh, sure, I can briefly
Because
cover
I have
this.
questions to go
Yep.
back, but I was
Okay.
going to, yeah.
Side by side.
Yeah, I mean, just highlight again, we did the proposed, tonight we're doing the adopted. Until we get the final budget forms from the Auditor General, I won't know truly if I need to come back September 15th to do a revision. Obviously, if there's a potential increase for the district, I'm going to bring that back because that is in the best interest of the district if we can increase our budget. But like I said, I think I captured everything. I'm 97% sure, but again, I will inform Chris and Dr. J if there is a budget revision, and I will do that prior to September 15th.
Okay, so we're estimating, or we're drafting our budget off of an estimation of a 100 student drop in enrollment, correct? Okay, and then the one-time, okay, hold on, let me see where I'm at. Okay, so the only way that we're gonna be able to increase those numbers is if it's less than that. Where are we at with enrollment right now, do we know? Or where did we get that, I guess where did we get that estimate?
We get the estimate
that we're losing
from
them?
the seniors out the door and what we project for kindergarten. So we're trying to be, I think, I'm hoping that's worst case scenario. I mean, that's what we're hoping for. It's really gonna come down to kindergarten. Kindergarten numbers are down across the state. And last year we had 55. So if you take 55 and 140 seniors, there's pretty much your 100, right? So you're pretty close to that. And then you're always going to have some, we track our kids. Like I said, one of our biggest areas of loss this past year was kids moving out of Fountain Hills, like actually moving out of the town. So that was a number that kind of alarmed me a little bit, that number. When I looked at, when I have Angie run me numbers, as far as losing students to competitor schools, it was really low this year. I felt like, 0 would be great, but I'm just being, it's pretty low in comparison to where it's been. And the number of kids we've got in is encouraging. But I think the number that concerns me the most is people leaving the town. there's nothing you can do on that, right? They're never coming back if they leave, most likely. There's a chance they could move back. But
Well,
yeah.
do we have a current number? Because I remember it wasn't that long ago that we were saying at least 700 of our students are over in Scottsdale. Do we have a current
No, 3.
number on that?
No,
Not-
it's
wasn't
never
set.
been 700.
Okay.
No. No, and I can tell you, every summer, there's movement, right? There's movement in and out. It happens at every school. At a large high school, I used to have, my number would fluctuate almost 100 on the 10-day drops. Just alone at a large high school, what my enrollment was to start the year, when I was doing parking passes, I'd always say, don't panic, it'll probably be 100 less by the time we get to our 10-day drops. It's pretty normal in those worlds that you're gonna have movement in the summer. As far as I see, we've had a huge decline in my opinion, of students leaving for our competitor districts. We still have some that do, but a lot come back. So, a lot of them leave and then they come back after they go over and realize they maybe liked it better here. So some do, some don't. But we also have had some kids come from our competitor districts to us. So it kind of fluctuates. So I think that's just being trying to be a safe number, so we're not coming back and saying, okay, the number, like we under budgeted here and now we have a problem. So hopefully that number holds. I've seen some early numbers. I don't want to get too excited yet because everything evens out. But I've seen some things that are surprisingly good, and then there's some things that are concerning as well. So it goes both ways. We've been trying. We've had, just on our new website, which isn't even the one you find when you search us, it's just you can only find it through typing it in or QR code because it's not officially 100% ready to launch. But on that new marketing site, in the last, this last month, we've had 1,000 hits on that. Now, that could be skewed a little bit due to some of the activities in our community, but we are, and I can see where they're coming from, and we've had a lot of hits from Scottsdale, and I don't know if that'll equate to kids. We send out a mailer trying to let people know we have open enrollment, so we're definitely trying to do some things, and we'll see what our kindergarten numbers come in at.
Okay. And then with the budget forms that we have a little bit later, I'll just ask my questions now. On page 6 of 8, for food service, there's not anything budgeted in the fiscal year, is that?
Is that the food
It
service
says- it says
match? That's
pri-
the food service match program?
Is that what it is?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, so that's matching. There's a formula that you run for what you're obligated to match from your M&O budget. Again, your district is not obligated to match.
I'm confused because from the prior year, we have 400,000 and in this year, we have nothing. So what does that mean for the district?
Oh, on the summary page.
Yes.
Yeah, sorry. No, right now you're running about flat with your food service. You are not gaining any revenue. Your contracted food service is basically breaking even with what your national school lunch and breakfast program are bringing in.
But wouldn't we still need to have a number budgeted for that?
It's a
department?
cash controlled fund, it's not budget derived, so whatever cash you roll over, essentially you're gonna end the year on zero, and you're gonna start the year on zero.
'Cause we get reimbursed for that.
Yeah. You'll see
I
on
understand,
the-
but we have a contract with a company usually, and so.
But
you-
there's
some
a
kind of-
no, in there like a no loss clause in there for us.
It's negative.
Yeah.
We lose money.
No, I'm saying, but there's protections for us in there.
Their protection is you will
Yes.
not exceed negative $5,000.
Yeah.
But essentially, what you'll see that greater report on the AFR where it shows expenditures, revenue. On the budget forms, that fund is not necessarily, you're not going to see ups and downs because it's just essentially budgeting for a cash fund, so it's not.
Okay, I guess that's kind of confusing, I guess, because like, how do we budget for gifts and donations when that's something that we don't have? I mean, don't we use that as we get it and as we need it through the year?
But you carry over a significant balance year to year, and so
So we had a carryover of 400,000 for food service last year?
prior year because all food was free, and so
Okay,
that significantly helped that fund. Unfortunately, that provision went away in '24, and so now the program is costing the district, and so it's costing a lot of districts.
Okay. And then just to make sure I have the numbers correct, our maintenance and operations total budget is 10,069,050, and then our capital is the 715, like 270, but we have an additional $1 million that we're saving as a contingency. Does that contingency money have to be capital, or is it kind of flexible?
No, whatever is rolled over in that fund has to stay in that fund.
Okay.
The board and the district does have flexibility to move the allocation, so the 715, you'll see on page, I think, 7. You do have flexibility, if you do want to obligate that to M&O or capital, there is that flexibility, but you can't change the previously budgeted capital funds. But any new budgeted capital funds, you do have flexibility to move those to M&O or capital as you see fit, so.
Okay, and then with how, because from what I originally understood, teacher pay had to come out of M&O and not capital, but we can put some positions under capital, like with transportation at least, we can do that?
There's no positions budgeted.
Okay,
That's
there's
under
no-
impact aid.
Okay, so then anything that's under the instructional, because there's like support services, student and instructional staff, there's a decrease in the budget numbers, and this is unrestricted capital outlay.
What page?
That-
Page
4.
33 of the board packet, let me see.
That's
Page
a-
4 of 8?
That's a category for spending, that's not,
Okay.
that's
I
not
did that.
personnel.
Okay.
Student support services, is that the exact?
Yeah, under
Yeah.
support services, there's a decrease of 45%. Are those reflecting the positions that were closed
No.
or we didn't fill, or what does that reflect?
No, that's a reflection of spending in that category. Student support
Okay.
services is like your counselors, your psychologists, those are student support services, and so in terms of capital funding, so you would be like, we're reducing funding in terms of what their equipment needs, right? That's a category, it's not a position.
Okay, I guess I'm confused as to how we're budgeting, we're budgeting less.
Well, we have one less counselor at the high school, middle school campus. And two, I think what you're saying, Tyler, is that we're reducing equipment and needs, like things they may need, correct?
We're reducing the budget from last year by $2.2 million, so you're gonna see across the board on every single category reductions.
I guess I wanted to see where those reductions were being made more specifically than just students and instructional staff, you know, and then.
Well, I'm subject to using the forms, I can't.
Yeah, I understand, I guess, I just mean as a board, when we see these things, it would be a little helpful to understand where the decreases are being made, because when we approach big spends, we're always told that it's budgeted, and it's been budgeted, but again, we don't see it in the budget right now, like, I don't see anywhere where, like, where's the camera funds coming from? I know we got a grant, but then does that comes from capital, is that coming from that
Yeah.
furniture
Capital.
money? You know, that, I guess that's a little bit more what I'm used to seeing when I do budgets, because it's more simple than this, obviously.
Yeah, and that was our effort with this slide here, right, where we try to break it down for you, because I know we're obligated, those are state forms, I can't
Yeah.
change it, so I have to utilize those, but that's why we brought forth a little more detailed budget, to break down that 1.8 in a more detailed fashion, so.
So like where are the cameras budgeted that we, I mean, I know there are
So it'd
grants
be
that
your,
we still have
it'd
to
be
pay
your
part
tech
of it.
equipment, and you are obligated to like match a portion of that grant, but that would be tech equipment.
Okay, and then the one last thing that I think would be really helpful is if we could, and I've asked for this before, have some kind of list of the programs, things like PBIS. It would be useful to know where all of these things that could be called extras, I'm not saying whether they're good or bad, but they could definitely be called extras, if we knew where that was coming from, because in the end, we hear that we don't have more money for teachers, but I know that we're spending a lot of this money on maybe things that we could maybe go without those and spend that money on teachers. Like, where does the money for Guppy Mat come from? Is that from the M&O budget, or is
Yeah,
that?
that's from M&O.
Okay. I just, things like that like programs or services and things that it would be useful to see which pots those come from, and
Yeah,
how
but
that
you-
affects our overall budget.
I agree, but you gotta remember, a lot of that spending is capital, which you can't use. And then second, the teachers, a lot of things they're asking for, those are important to them too. So yes, the salary is important, but also working in a district that provides them with the tools and the opportunities they're looking for also is very important. So some teachers would work in a district that pays less but has more opportunity and works in a district where they feel they support their craft. Others may not. So you have to also look at the fact that, yes, that the math textbooks, that's a capital expense. Do we need to have that? Yeah, we do, because the teachers they want something that, they can feel that they can get behind and that they can utilize. So sometimes it's capital, sometimes it's an M&O need, but I can say that there's not a lot left after you look at the salaries to run the district, and there's very, very few things left that we could cut. And I do want to remind that we have increased our teacher salaries the last 2 years, so significantly. And it's a goal I've always said, our goal is to be the highest paid. It may take a long time to get there, but that is a goal.
Yeah, I think you've done really great work with that, and I definitely appreciate it. My thought process along asking these questions was mostly with something like PBIS, where it was grant supported and a lot of money came tied to it, but now the district is kind of straddled with a program that doesn't make money, and it is a kind of a costly, and I'm saying this as someone who volunteered and donated a lot of what went into that PBIS store. It's a costly thing, and it's a good program, but in the end, I think that if teachers knew that we were paying for that program, some of them don't think that it was necessarily as effective as it could be, and they might prefer having a little more support financially themselves. And not always, there might be some that they do prefer to us to support instead of
Are you
increasing.
talking about
but-
the store or the program that runs? Because the
Well, I know
program is,
we
I
budget
think, under
stipends, I don't
5,000.
think that we get
I've
money for that
moved
program anymore.
away, I've
correct?
cut a lot of those PBIS
Yeah.
stipends down. I don't even
Grant
know,
funded? Because
It
you're
is.
saying that program's grant
Grant
funded.
funded.
so-
It's
it's all
still
grant
grant
funded,
funded?
yes. So again, even if it's not, we've cut so
Can you
many of
send the
those.
paperwork on that? Because
Yeah.
I think I remember that the grant was for a very short time and that it,
It's
when.
out of our title grants, ESEA, and it has been the coordinator positions. I can't talk about the funds, the coordinator positions are paid out of our title grants.
Okay.
And you cut some of the coordinator positions as well.
Yes, we
Yeah,
we
we
took away
kinda-
some of the PBIS stipends.
Yes.
So, yeah. Okay, do you have any other questions?
I think that's it.
Okay. Again, this is a public meeting, so if there are questions from the audience regarding the budget, now would be the time to ask. Okay. Seeing none, the board will vote to reconvene the regular meeting. Do I have a motion?
I'll go ahead.
I so move.
I'll second.
I have a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. The meeting is reconvened. We'll go right into superintendent comments.
Madam President, members of the board and guests, I'll be very short. One thing I just want to share is we're working with a company for an 8th grade trip that we're sending you information on that you'll be able to take a look at. It'll be coming on an upcoming agenda item, but we're looking at a California trip for 8th grade, not to Catalina Island, but to the Pauley Institute. So this is coming from Ms. McDonald and Ms. Beard. It's something they're interested in doing. So they'll come at an upcoming meeting to present to you guys on that. So that's something we've been working on. The other thing I just want to share is we are going to be repaving the high school parking lot this summer. It's much, much overdue. And we'll be using our parking fee money over the years to pay for that. And I just want to give a shout out to Juan, who's our new maintenance coordinator. He worked really hard to get to a price that I could say yes to, and that'll be coming up soon. I think it's scheduled the first week of July, but it'll cover the entry, staff parking for admin, all the student parking lot, and I want to say even the driveway in the back to the football field. So that's something that's much overdue, and we will no longer be doing any kind of senior painting moving forward. So I know, but we need to maintain the facility. So I'll talk to all the kids and let them know that.
I'm sure there's got to be something else.
We'll
can
find
do
something else
designated
to do.
senior spots.
Yeah.
Oh,
So,
no, be creative. Come on,
Yep.
PTO, be creative.
Right.
so with that, I conclude my comments.
Thank you. Next up, we're going to hear a report from Nathan and Associates regarding a property valuation.
Okay, good afternoon, board. Appreciate you having me in. My name is Ryan Duncan. I'm with Nathan Associates. We're a land brokerage company here based in Scottsdale. We've been in business since 1980. My name is Ryan Duncan. I am a born and raised native. I've been in the business for 25 years. I appreciate the superintendent inviting us to provide you guys with an analysis. I'm a bit of a real estate nerd, so I'm going to slide through some market history quickly, and then we'll get to the specific properties. So that's our firm there pictured. The theme this year for our annual poster was Fins Up, in memory of Jimmy Buffett, who the guy that owns our shop is in love with. So take that as it will. Quick history on the market here. What I'm putting before you, we track permits, residential permits here in the market. And so we use that to sort of determine valuation and growth over time. So point out a couple of things here. 2005, 63,000 permits in the Phoenix MSA. If you've been around here a while, you remember that time. Everything was going. It was crazy. Quickly followed by the biggest fall in the history of Arizona. Looking forward at 2024, you get a sense of where we've been and where we are today. The permits kind of in the middle there is R.L. Brown. He's a local prognosticator of the market. U of A also provides the same type of analysis. And so you can see, based on a population base overall in the MSA, we're doing a fraction of what we used to do. But I would tell you that the market is a much more solid footing, solid ground. So we feel that a stable market's a safe market, and so overall the market feels pretty good. Similar statistics here. Blue represents recessions, yellow represents population growth, red represents the permit growth over time. So if you look at, going back to 1975, again, our company started in 1980, and you can see kind of how the valley has grown to its current population base. The two sort of narrow recession bands that you'll see closer to 2020 And then again in 2023 represent some sort of interesting dynamics there, you can probably guess. And then that's the forward-looking projections for population in the blue on the far right. And then permitting growth from R.L. Brown, permanent growth from the University of Arizona. So just quick, early 2000 teens, we started to see the jump in population growth, quickly followed by the permitting that jumped again to follow that. Second quarter, we were basically through the finished lot inventory that exists in the market, so we started to see home prices click up. COVID hits, coronavirus, and we, as a market, experienced basically every deal in town fell apart because everyone anticipated that the housing market was going to fall apart. And for a short window, it did. Within about 2 months, phones started ringing again. The home builders are going, hey, we're selling houses. We need to get this thing going again. We had been out of the office for about a month, and the guy that owns the shop called and said, hey, I need you guys back in here. They need to buy lots. So the home builders were back, and they were selling like crazy. Then the next significant thing that came, we saw interest rates start to increase in 2022, 2023. We indicate May 16th as a date. We got a call from one of our big builder clients, and they called and said, hey, we had a dozen deals in escrow with them. They said, hey, we got to drop everything. We think interest rates are going to go. And so they did. They dropped a dozen deals, and then we lost 90 transactions, large transactions, big public builders in a period of about 15 days. Again, everybody expected interest rates to crush the market. For a period of a few months, it did, and then the builders quickly realized that people that owned homes weren't selling their homes, and therefore the home builders and the new home market were going to soak up all the home buyers because demand still existed. Again, looking at the population growth. We're lucky that we live in Arizona. We share a border with a state that's crushing its citizens, and so we've got a lot of demand here, on top of the fact that we're growing jobs like we've never seen before in this market. Again, this is just another illustration. Yellow represents permits over time, going back to 2020. The red represents what interest rates have been doing, so you can see kind of what's happened over time. It gets a little busy here on the right. Long story made short, interest rates climbing had a positive effect, if you can believe it, on the new home housing side of life, primarily because on the resale home side of life, people felt locked into their rates and stopped putting homes on the market. And so if you look at, I'll get to the next slide, where inventory looks like on the resale side, we had a all-time low of 8,500 units on the market right after sort of interest rates climbed. So where we sit today, again, looking back in reference to history, when the market fell apart, we were just under 60,000 units on the market. Today we sit about 20,000, which again is still low against demand. So there's just a couple of stats. So these are the two properties we were asked to evaluate, the Aspen site and the Arroyo Vista site. We'll start with the Aspen site. Roughly 19.95 acres, zoned R135. We're not engineers, we're not land planners, we're brokers, but our evaluation of the site, just from aerial and site visits, there's a pretty significant wash that runs along the western boundary of the site. And so if you look just to the north of the property, you can sort of see where the existing homes sort of backed up to the wash. If you carry that down further south toward the southeastern boundary of the site, it would look like roughly half of the site is probably unusable based on our estimation. So what we've assumed is half the site's probably usable, and then what we've assumed is the zoning, which is R135. And so in our review, we think the site would render between 12 and 14 lots. In our vernacular, we sort of back everything into based on a finished lot. We would guess that these finished lots might be worth $450,000 to $525,000 per lot. We assume that the construction cost for each of those lots would be between $245,000 and $265,000 per lot. So estimated land value is the difference between the finished lot value and the cost to construct those lots. That gets you a residual land value of 3.15 to 3.8. Now, we would recommend, whether we do it or someone else does it, that you have an engineer look at this and give you a strong evaluation of what the property, whether it needs infill or, fill dirt to be put on top to bring the pad up to develop the site, and then just evaluate what you're going to get away with from the drainage perspective. But again, we feel pretty good about that range. And again, that's subject to Fountain Hills approving a final plat. Plats take today, based on town staff, I would guess that a plat process, an entitlement process, even if you're going by right of zoning, would probably take you between 8 and 14 months. So from start to finish, if you were to put the property in escrow with the builder. And again, that's what it will be. It's a residential builder deal.
Can I ask you a question?
Yes, sir.
So those 12 to 14 lots would all be along Aspen, correct?
They would be up here, up on the high side. Can you see my
On
cursor?
the right side?
Yep,
Yep.
yes, sir.
Okay.
Okay.
And would the lot size be comparable to what's there now, the existing
So the
homes?
lots to the north are a little smaller. Those are R110s. So those are 10, call it 8 to 12,000 square feet lots. These are going to be a little bigger. So they're R135s. So again, we're making estimations based on math, not on the usable site and the orientation of the property. We wouldn't dare to lay it out, but just know what we do. So we're
Okay.
just using math to equate to how many lots we think we can get on the site.
So presumably the home value would be at least comparable, if not exceeding the current homes there, right?
Based on these lot values that we had assumed, and based on what the new home product exists in the market here, they would be in excess of $1 million. They'd probably average between 1.1 and 1.7 would be my guess.
Okay, thanks.
Next site is the Arroyo Vista site. I'm not picking favorites, but this site seems to be a little bit more developable. Soft undulating terrain, less impact from the wash, although there is wash influence on the north side. It seems to be outside of the property boundary, which I think is helpful. Again, same comment, needs to be evaluated for drainage by an engineer on the northern boundary. This site is zoned per the town of Fountain Hills, zoned R118, which provides a better yield, more density, smaller lots. In this case, we've assumed, again, just based on math, between 30 and 32 lots viably built there. Again, it'll depend a lot on if we're able to squeeze it all in because the site's a little funky shaped. But we've assumed finished lot values here, same math, 375 to 400,000 for a finished lot. Lots will be a little cheaper to build, 200 to 220,000, which renders a residual land value between 5 million and a little over 6 million, subject to final approval from Fountain Hills. Again, numbers could move once we've got some site plans that have been done. So I'm not trying to be cute. I'm just saying that the math can change based on what you can really get on the property. But we would think this one, again, is more developable just in looking at the asset and understanding the zoning.
And what do you think home prices would go for in that area?
I think today, these are still large lots. 18,000 square feet is a big lot.
Yeah.
And so I think these are still above $1 million. Now, there's a whole nother side to the discussion that we can have, which is rezoning. If you look in the region here, there's a lot more density surrounding this property. And so there's an argument to be had that you could go pursue higher density, R110, maybe even condo, or what's universally sort of the thing today when rates get better, which is build to rent, so rental product. Some of this build to stay or build to rent is what they call it. And so if that's the case, the value jumps considerably, but that's a different process. It encourages more risk, and the time frame from opening of escrow to closing can be, can be longer than 2 years. So.
Well, and is that something that the district should pursue, or would it just be something that we could let developers know if they're interested, if that's potential?
I think the district could do a little research through a broker, expert like me or a firm like mine, talk to some zoning attorneys, figure out the general plan is usually what's the guiding principle for most towns. In this case, Town of Fountain Hills, the general plan doesn't support higher density. That hasn't stopped us before. And so, again, I would encourage you to talk to a zoning attorney. We could talk to a zoning attorney on your behalf to figure out what the opportunities are for rezoning. We rezone sites all the time. It's something that,
Before selling them, like the
yeah,
seller
it's
does
sort
it?
of in the midst of selling. And so it's not something that I would encourage, based on the discussion we just had related to budgeting. It's an expensive process. And so I wouldn't encourage the district to take that on specifically, but a buyer would, and it's at their expense and their cost. It adds risk to you as it relates to the deal could fail. Town of Fountain Hills could push back and say no, and that could squander a potential transaction. But it would be something that I would encourage you or whomever is representing you to look into.
Because that would be a condition of the contract, right?
Yes,
That
ma'am.
if somebody offered to buy it, it would be conditional on whether they can get it rezoned.
Yes, ma'am. Most transactions, if we're talking about the dollar volumes we're talking about, are going to be subject to a final approval from Fountain Hills. They need to make sure that they can do what they intend to do, and they want to be in the ground as soon as they close. So, because the money is hot.
But what you're saying is leaving the zoning as is, which someone could buy and build immediately on, somewhere between 5 and 6 million.
Right. And immediate means 12 months, probably.
Right, but I'm just
Right.
saying they don't have to worry about any of that. It's already
Correct.
zoned and they know they're buying it at that zoned.
R118.
Yeah.
Yeah, in this case. And so, again, then it's just engineering, plating approvals from the town of Fountain Hills.
So
Which-
if it was rezoned to a higher density, what would be the estimated land value?
So, again, we'd use the same sort of principle. We run math to figure out how many lots you could get on it. And the numbers come up and down, but I mean, even if you took it to an R110, realistically, you could probably double the yield on the site. Now, the smaller lots are worth less, so it's kind of a give and a take. But, you know, I think the number would jump quite a bit.
Okay.
Are there other questions from the board? Thank you so much.
Yeah, you're
That was
welcome.
very informative,
Sorry it
and
was
we
quick.
appreciate it.
And
Nope.
and if you guys have specific questions, feel free to email me. They've got my information, and we can give you the long form of the presentation.
Is it possible to share your slideshow with us?
Yeah, you have it.
Yes,
Oh,
I
you have
Yeah.
it. Okay,
Yeah.
please send that.
Yeah.
All right,
Thank you.
Thank you for your
so
time.
much.
Appreciate
Thank
it.
you.
Thank
for
you.
coming.
Okay, public comments, do we have any public comments, Krista? Okay, we will move right into our action items. The first one is the proposed budget of 24-25, which we heard at our last meeting. There was some confusion, and so as our email stated that Krista sent, we will need to approve the proposed budget and then approve the adopted budget. Are there, go ahead.
I'm sorry, I don't understand the error, maybe I didn't read that email.
It
but-
needed to be voted on at our last meeting, and that wasn't made clear, and so it didn't make it to the agenda as a voting item.
Okay, I thought we voted on an agenda last time, we didn't? I mean, on a budget last time?
We did not.
Okay.
We heard the budget from Tyler, and we had the public meeting, but the board never voted to adopt the
Okay.
proposed budget.
Okay.
So we need to do that first. So, are there any questions regarding the proposed budget that we heard at our last meeting? Hearing none, I'll move that we approve the proposed budget for 24-25.
I second.
I have a motion and a second. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Nay.
Okay, 3-1. Next is the adopted budget, which we heard tonight. We satisfied our public meeting. Tyler has given the proposed, or the adopted budget of what they are proposing. Are there any questions regarding the budget that was presented tonight? Okay, hearing none, do I have a motion?
I so move.
I'll second.
I have a motion, a second. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Nay.
It's 3-1, Krista. Next up is the personnel action report. Are there questions or comments regarding the personnel action?
I had some questions, sorry. We had for the performance fee for the teachers, I was just wondering how that's determined, like, is it just site admin, or is it, do parents have a
Yeah,
say, or
so,
is it based off of test scores, like, what's the formula?
so it's in their, meet, I think it's in their meet.
It's in the meet and
Yeah, it's a
confer.
meet and confer, so, and they vote, so the teachers, there's a plan that's created, which has been created in the past, and so there's different options for them to earn it, so.
Oh, right, like doing a club. and-
Yes, and so then what happens is the site leader will go through and ensure those things have happened, and then work with Kaylee and HR to make sure that those things are done, and once all that has been accepted, then Kaylee puts it on the personnel to pay them.
Okay, and so is any of it tied to student success?
Yes, some is,
Okay.
yes. And, you know, typically in a lot of, you know, I haven't, you know, last couple of years I've been at a site as a principal, but in the past, it was always, you know, a lot of times it's a pre-test and a post-test, or it might be tied to a state test. So, but remember, not every teacher has that option. So if you're a PE teacher you don't have a state test, so then it becomes a pre and a post test of some sort. So there's some flexibility in that on how they can earn that money, and that's all outlined in the meet and confer process for you.
And that also includes if they take more courses, get a master's degree and everything too?
Not for performance
Oh,
pay,
right.
that's for the salary schedule.
Okay.
Yeah,
And this is paid out of 301 money still?
yes.
And then with the additional hours, with Chris Hartman being on the list, was that for training for his new position?
It is, he's decided not to take a vacation this summer and to immediately start that process. And so Craig and Tyler have been working with him. Craig has been graciously not only training, but is going to continue for a little longer. I'm not gonna say how long because, yeah.
Is she at least giving you some cookies or something?
But Craig's been gracious to be several days a week, and it's also given me an opportunity to work with Chris on some of the things that I want to see in that department moving forward, that things we've been working on and some new things that I want him to be making a priority. So anytime you switch leadership positions and you're at that level, having a few extra weeks to get kind of underneath things and be ready to go for the new school year is beneficial to that employee.
Yes, I agree, and I'm in a tough spot with that one because I absolutely believe that we should pay someone for their time, especially when they're training for a new position. However, with my feeling that we should have gotten someone that had that experience already, I do feel a little bit conflicted there. And then my last question was just on the, with yours, I was just confused by the wording, the superintendent supplemental. Is that what was just approved at the last meeting, or is that an additional stipend?
Where's that?
It's at the bottom.
It's at the bottom.
You have vacation payout and superintendent supplemental.
Oh, yeah, so part of my contract is I can cash out unused vacation each year, and so there's a limit to that, so that's what I'm doing.
And then what's the superintendent supplemental?
So that would be I believe that's the bonus, no, it's not a bonus,
That
but
was,
performance
yeah,
pay.
It's performance
Okay, I
pay.
guess I was just confused because it wasn't listed as performance pay like the other
Yes.
ones were, so I wanted to double check that. Okay. Thank you, those were my questions.
Any other questions regarding the personnel? Hearing none, I move that we approve the personnel report as presented.
Second?
I have a motion and a second. All in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed? 3-1. Next up is the 24-25 extracurricular fees. These change as things come and go, so this is basically round one. These come several times during the year. So are there any questions or comments regarding the proposed fees? Hearing none, do I have a motion?
I move we approve the proposed
I'll second.
extracurricular activities.
I have a motion and a second. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Next up is the administrative meet and confer. We talked about this last time, the admin really didn't have a meet and confer, and so Kaylee has now put this together. So are there any questions regarding the meet and confer?
No, and there was just a little change, I believe. It's at page 7.
So this is just administration,
It's just for the
and
administration.
then the teachers have their own
Right,
separate?
yeah,
And so do our
support
support staff.
staff,
I
right.
support.
So yeah.
And are these run similar to like a committee or what, it's like, okay,
Mhm.
like a
Yeah, they
association
get
or-
together several times during the period,
Well,
and,
that's not an association.
no, it's not an association.
I was trying to think of the FHEA, because that's what, that was part
It's
of
not
the
just-
confer, right?
well,
Or-
So years ago, it was just FHEA that participated in meet and confer,
Okay.
but actually shortly after I came on the board, I requested that it's not just FHEA because not all of our certified or classified staff were part of FHEA, and I felt they were being left out. So I asked for that committee to be made up of a different group of people, that we had FHEA, we had just regular teachers who were not part of FHEA, so that it was diverse.
I do like being more local and just.
Yeah, so it's just our staff and they can volunteer to be part of that. Are there any questions regarding the meet and confer document for administration?
No.
Okay, hearing none, do I have a motion?
I move we approve the administration meet and confer.
I'll second.
I have a motion and a second. All in favor say aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. Next up is the stipend for lines added to personal cell phones. We discussed this, that Verizon was offering a $10 line. Dr. J, did we find out if other carriers are also offering this?
I have not heard back from Jared on that, no. But again, what you'd be approving is a set number, and if it doesn't work for them, then it wouldn't work. We're not making anyone do this, we're just saying it's nice to be able to have, to put your number in the community. I've always done it, whether I got paid for it or not, but I think, it's a nice offering to people to say, if this works for you and you want to do it, great, if not, you don't have to.
And my only concern with this is I could just see this getting a little bit out of control, because I think it is a good thing. However, is this something that would be coming to the board, like just where we know how many we're paying out, so we?
It's just for the admin.
It's just
Okay.
administration.
Yes,
Yeah.
and
Okay.
and actually, I will make the motion that we approve the stipend, but at a district total of no more than $150 for a second line added to a cell phone.
Okay, I second.
Are there any other questions or comments?
So that would allow up to about 15?
15 people, right.
Okay.
Okay. All in favor of approving the cell phone usage up to $150 total for the district, say aye.
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 Any opposed? Motion carries.
That's, I think, okay.
What?
Well,
Is that
I think
good
the
enough?
way I hear that is, we have $150 now to use as a district.
Should
I
be
think
per
what you were
month.
trying to say is $150 a month.
Month.
Oh.
Sorry,
Yeah.
it's $10 a line per
Right.
month.
So you want to keep it to
So-
less than 15 people, but I think 150 total per employee is what we're asking for. That gives you 120 for 12 months and $30 for tax, so that's why
Okay.
we're thinking about
Yeah,
150.
your recommendation on here wasn't clear.
I'm sorry, I
I just
apologize.
want, okay, so let's back up. So you want $150 per month or $150 per employee
Per employee.
for
Yes,
the year?
for the year.
And how many employees do you anticipate
We,
having?
we were limited to just administration, so that would be 10 maybe. It's going to be under 15.
Is there a way to do this retroactively like, can we just say we're not gonna do more than 15 and then, so that we're not maybe tying a number to it, or, because,
Well, 15 at $10 a month is $150 a month.
Yeah.
So $150 times 12 months.
but I just feel like,
180.
it's a little more flexible to give the number amount than just say we're gonna cap it at 15 contracts,
What did you say?
or 15 lines.
1,800?
1,800,
Yeah.
yeah. So it'd be 1,800 a year if we said 15, no more than 15 a month. Okay, so I'll redo my motion. Okay. So I will move that the board approve for staff members,
Administration.
staff members, there's other staff members that are not admin, like Ray. I don't know who they want.
Custodians.
Right. To receive a stipend of costing the district no more than $1,800 a year. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
I have a motion and a second. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. So
Thank
you have $1,800
Thank
to
you.
make
Yep.
that work.
Okay.
Okay. Update to policy JJAB. This was regarding the clubs, that we changed it from 7th grade to 6th grade. So there's two areas of the policy that we changed that said 7th grade, and we've changed it to 6th grade. So middle school clubs will now be 6th grade and up. Or, I'm sorry, middle school, high school will be 6 through 12. Are there any questions regarding policy JJAB? Hearing none, do I have a motion?
I move we approve the change to policy JJAB.
I have a motion and a second. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Next up is the intergovernmental agreement between Fountain Hills and the Maricopa County School Superintendent regarding election services. We really don't have a choice, so.
Yeah.
It is a year of election for the district with the school board, so we will be having an election at this time, so it's scheduled for November. Are there any questions regarding the election services IGA? Okay, hearing none, do I have a motion?
I'll second.
I have a motion and a second. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Next up is the board meeting dates for the school year of 24 to 25. I would like to say that there needs to be a correction. Let's see, where is it? Oh, it said that the meeting, let's see.
Yes, I think
It was
it's the October
2024 twice,
1st,
but it's
isn't
already
that a first
corrected in the-
Wednesday?
Right, but there
Latest.
was a thing that said, it should say the first Tuesday, October 2nd.
October, we changed it to October 1st.
Oh,
And it
here,
says
in
first
the,
Wednesday.
in the list,
Yeah.
it says October 1st, first Wednesday, it's actually the first
First
Tuesday.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
are there any other questions or
Also,
comments?
we have the August 21st and September 18th, those are 5 o'clock instead of 6.
They do, yeah.
Okay.
So,
Do we want to switch that to 6?
yep.
Okay.
Any other questions or comments? I move that we approve the board meeting dates with the changes showing that October 1st is the first Tuesday, August 21st, and September 18th are 6 PM meetings, not 5 o'clock meetings.
I second.
I have a motion and a second. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Next up is the Beyond Textbooks IGA. Dr. J, do you have any information you'd like to add to this?
I do not, but I can answer any questions you have. I've shared over that we've been a longtime partner, and I do attribute a lot of our academic success to using the program, and I do believe that it works very, very well.
Are there questions or comments from the board regarding Beyond Textbooks?
I have one. At the last board meeting, I had asked a question about IXL, and that is like kind of similar, it sounded similar to me for Beyond Textbooks, and I know that the elementary school hasn't been as, they haven't used Beyond Textbooks as much as the other sites. Are we looking at getting rid of IXL and implementing Beyond Textbooks, or are we going to?
No, they're different things. They're quite different. IXL is used in the classroom as a teaching aid and, a way for the students to do small, units of work in time. That kind of supplements what the teacher is teaching. It also gives some diagnostic information and data back to the teachers on where they're at. Where Beyond Textbooks is really just a map of the state standards and how to teach them in a year-long calendar efficiently without running out of time or without overlooking some of the more power standards that are out there. So no, I don't believe that one or the other is an option. We are always looking for, is IXL working for us? It's a software program. Do we want to look at a different one? The teachers at the elementary really like it, and they use it a lot. I spent more time at the elementary school than I did any other site this last year, and I saw it used a lot, but not to a point where kids are on computers a lot. It was not something I saw constant, but no, I think they're quite different.
I just know that you had mentioned that if you felt that if the elementary had used Beyond Textbooks with more fidelity, that the outcome would have been
Absolutely.
better.
Mhm.
And so are we looking at implementing that? And
Yes.
then at what, just between the two, are we, and not that I just expect teachers to do everything on their own, but are we giving teachers the freedom and the ability to kind of draft their own lessons within those
Yeah,
calendar
so
guidelines, or-
like the best way to describe Beyond Textbooks is the program tells you what you need to teach in order to follow the state and for how long you need to teach it. But how you teach it is completely up to you. So we always tell our teachers, some are gifted in one area and others are gifted in another. So some are storytellers, some are cooperative learning experts, some are co-teach. So it just really is up to them on their strengths. But knowing specifically that this, not only what the state standard is, but it's broken down. So for a young teacher, I can read that state standard, but that doesn't mean I know how to teach it. So it breaks it down for you and unwraps it so it's really easy to understand and gives you guiding questions and just a lot of tools that teachers sometimes don't know they have available, and when they use them, they find success.
I've seen when Jessica did that breakdown for us, that was really helpful. And I could see how, as someone trying to teach, that something like that would be helpful. Although I understand that it does come with a plethora of resources, and so I guess to some degree, my thought process with maybe the elementary, because with working with my own kids, I can see how when you have so many resources, sometimes it's harder to find what you want to use. I just want to make sure that we're like, why didn't they use it, and why,
I'll be honest, I don't think our teachers use the resources very often. I know at the high school, they rarely did. And that's a personal choice. I mean, Christine Barson has been teaching for, a long time. She may not need those kind of resources, and she feels comfortable, and she's had great scores over the years and is fine with what she has. But for a young teacher that's maybe looking for something, it's worth looking at. It's not overwhelming though. Some state standards have more resources than others. It's very easy to go through and take a look at. This is something I want to use. This is something I don't want to use. So no, I think they're going to be more dependent on their math curriculum if that is approved. They use their English curriculum and the workbooks that go with it. I would say 90% of what they do is out of that. That's not my push there. My push there is at the elementary is you need to have formative assessments every Friday. That's the key to the whole program. So if at the end of the week on Friday and you give a math quiz and 90% of the kids cannot answer those questions, you need to start over. You look and say, okay, some didn't go right, and I'm going to start over and try again. If 70% of the kids get it and 30% don't, then they go to reteach, and they get a 45-minute session 5 times a week to relearn that material that they didn't get so that they don't fall farther behind. And the first year we used it at the high school, we had about 300 and so math students in Algebra 1, Algebra 2, and Geometry. And the first reteach we had 250 students in reteach. And I remember Dr. Sweeney coming down to my office and going, I hope you know what you're doing. And I was like, so do I at the time, I was new. So 2 weeks later, that number was down to like 50, and 2 weeks later it's down to 25, and it's hovered around 10 to 15 per week ever since. The kids, when they know they have to come back and they're going to be held accountable for that information, a lot of them want to get it done the first time and not have to come back. Sometimes they just have to. It's a concept they just can't get, and that's okay. Some go back because they got an 80 and they want 100%. So it's a great opportunity. At the elementary, we built it into the schedule, so it's right there for them every single day to do those. And then you track that data every single week. And so at the end of the year, when I was a high school principal, I knew where every single kid was, predicted of where they're going to be on their state test scores. And that's how we became, one of those years, we were number 2 in the state of state test scores in all of comprehensive public high schools. So, and that doesn't include, all the privates and charter. I'm talking about comprehensive public high schools. We rocked it, and it was because we knew where all our kids were. And that's what the middle school did this past year. She's had some really good results. I'm really proud of the work they've done. High school's been able to maintain, and now we just need to continue that movement down in our K-5.
And Beyond Textbooks does the tests, like
Yeah, they're already,
populate the tests and stuff?
so we use Vail's, all of Vail's tests are already in a system called Performance Matters. And so it's really simple for the teachers. They just click on it, it's a 5-question, which I love, doesn't take a long time, and they have to get 4 out of 5 right to not have reteach. Because if you have 80%, we feel good with 80%. We'd like to be 100, but 80%, we feel like you know the material, you maybe just need a little bit of refreshing on one of those questions. If you're getting a 2, you have a lot of work to do.
And you're going to have professional development for the new hirees in the
Yes.
beginning?
We do, and then every Wednesday, that's where the principals really need to be working with their staff. So it may not be professional development for all teachers, some might have release time and others are in those types of things. Christine Barsama's offered multiple times to come down and do trainings, so I know Ms. Reichler's gonna take her up on that. Some of the high school teachers are willing to do that. But it's really just about being diligent every single week of tracking the kids and making sure that they're not falling behind. When you do that, you have tremendous results.
Okay, and then this, 15,950, that's for the year? That's
Yes.
the total cost? We
Mhm.
don't have any other costs tied to
Yeah,
the
we have not
textbooks?
done any training through them in a while. It's, it's an additional cost, and I just haven't felt that, since I implemented it years ago, I feel like I can answer most of the questions and do most of the training for the staff.
Okay, and then one last thing, the number under the student fee, it has quantity at 1150. Are we going to be able to change that to reflect?
Yeah, it's estimated based
Okay.
on our estimate of student count.
But we're not,
They finalize it as the year goes on.
okay, so that will be adjusted and, okay. Thank you. Oh, one last thing, I would like, I asked last time, but it would be, I think, helpful if that's something that the board could have access to, because I know Dave said that he felt it checked the box, that the board had already approved it, but I think that just having board oversight and it being able to access the resources
Yeah.
would be helpful,
That's
especially, and give the community some confidence.
Yeah, Krista, if you could work with Vail on that.
Any other questions or comments?
I,
Hearing,
I feel that, if we're invited to a classroom to watch how it works, it would be enough.
Yeah, and you're always welcome if you want to, like you did with Jessica, if you ever want me to take you through it. It's very simple. That's the thing about it. I don't know how much they make a year off of it. I'm imagining it's millions. But it's a really simple thing that they were able to package and do something with. And but it takes a lot of work out, like when we don't have a curriculum department. So I'm it. So it helps a little bit with having something that we know works and has been successful in our district. And we've had districts, I've seen districts who have not implemented it correctly and it didn't work and they abandoned it. But it really comes down to how it's implemented and how the leaders of the school utilize it.
I remember when these things came out, having to sit with groups to develop the whole thing. So the fact that it's all there already
Yeah.
for you,
Yeah.
including the pre and post tests, I think is fantastic.
Yep.
Oh, do you want, I move that we approve the, what is it, Beyond Textbooks, IGA.
do I have a second?
I'll second.
I have a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
I'm going to abstain.
So 301. Okay. Next up is the purchase for the EPIC education, special education staffing. We talked about this at our last meeting, that we're having a hard time finding special ed teachers, and so it's a proposed contract for a special ed teacher totaling $121,512. I'm going to say the same thing I said last time. I just can't justify spending $121,000 on a teacher. Not that I don't think they're worth it, but I think our teachers are worth a lot more than what they're paid, and I'm not an advocate of doing this.
Well, and I think if, in the end, if we're gonna spend the money, we would be better off looking at increasing that position. It's a hard to fill, that requires additional education and certification, and you're dealing with the children that are harder to educate in general. And so I think that we need to have a serious discussion about increasing our pay for that position. What do we currently pay our SPED teachers?
Any idea?
I mean, they're all over. Some have been here a long time, some are new.
I saw some ranges even in Scottsdale and Mesa that had pretty wide ranges, so can you give me maybe a range, like low to high?
I'd say, low would be a brand-new teacher, so you're looking at, probably 57 with a hard to fill, as high as probably 70, 72, something like that. I do want to share with this one, this is, Leah couldn't be here tonight, but she did want me to share that the EPIC, the contract teacher through EPIC is for a self-contained teacher, which is a little different. So sometimes we contract resource teachers, and that's the kind of teacher you typically would think of as, my special ed teacher I go to for resource, help. It might be a co-teacher model where they go into the classroom and work with them in the math classroom. This is self-contained, so these are students who are, spending the if not the entire day in a self-contained classroom or majority of their day. And not only are they extremely hard to find in general, they're even getting hard to find as a contracted teacher. So she just wanted me to share that she understands the concern, but if we do not have a self-contained teacher in place, what we would need to do then is we would need to contract with Sierra Academy and ACES and some of these other schools and send some of those children to those placements, which would be very costly to the district. And so, again, each kid has an IEP, each one is different. So this specific one is different than the others that are going to come to you in the future that are for resource or for, that are your traditional special ed teachers. This one is very specific to self-contained, and we only have two self-contained teachers, two self-contained classrooms in the district. We have one at the elementary, and we have one at the middle high school campus. The middle high school campus is staffed by a Fountain Hills USD employee. This is a elementary position that has a variety of needs that are met through through that self-contained program. So I'm just reading what she asked me to read for you.
What I want to say is, I absolutely hate the fact that this is done, not because of us, and I know going to the conference this past weekend, the leadership conference for ASBA, everybody was complaining about the same thing, because we're spending so much more money giving these companies money. What we'd love to know is, what percentage are they getting versus
So
what the
I'm glad you
teachers-
asked that, Lillian, because I've been in contact with one we worked with last year, and they will not give me an answer. I've asked 3 times, and that's concerning to me, number one. I am going to be speaking at the upcoming Guppy Mac conference in September on this issue to the other superintendents there, just raising the concern of how this is affecting small districts, and what affects small districts will eventually affect the largest. I had a conversation with a large district today. Over half of all of their teachers in their district are contracted for special ed.
Well, I think
We all are
we're-
experiencing this.
I think we're gonna help the problem along if we end up doing something like this, because then we incentivize teachers, especially specialty ed teachers, to go that route because they get a more competitive rate. When I think that we could look at adding a significant boost to this pay rate, which when I'm looking online, the average pay for a self-contained sped teacher in Arizona is $58,000. And the highest paying cities for special education teachers is Los Angeles, California. It's only $80,000. It's not that much more. Bronx, New York, $70,000. So if we looked at adding $25,000 to the salary of these positions, our top paid people would be making over 90, which is more than any of these, and we'd have a self-contained that we don't have to pay 121. We'd still be saving a significant chunk of money.
I know
think
it's
that we should
funny,
look
but
at that.
I agree with Matt.
Yeah,
But I think
But we
the
don't-
districts are being held hostage.
Yeah.
And I think that the Department of Education needs to start stepping up, and that the legislature needs to step up and start funding special ed properly. So I'm not gonna be held hostage by a contracted company when our special ed teachers work extremely hard. And while I appreciate that, I know Ms. Gleason is a very hard worker and that she is trying to fill these positions, and I want to make sure our kids are serviced properly, I think we're being held hostage by that. And I would rather pay our staff and figure something out, so.
Okay.
And we could incentivize it with the fact that they get retirement, whereas if they go through these other companies, they don't. And then, I mean, for me, I would never feel good with someone else making money off of my work, and that would be a huge, like, if we're willing to pay a competitive rate and give someone the chance to, get all of their money instead of some company taking some off the top, I think that there's.
I don't disagree. So we've, for some of the people that are going that route, the benefits and the retirement is just not on their radar. And I think it should be, obviously, because you got to think about retirement, you got to think about, if your health were to be an issue. So I have no problem with that. But what I want to just point out, though, is when you start shifting some of these salaries, it can have an effect on the rest of the staff. So now, you may have, if you shift it extremely, other special ed teachers will say, I know self-contained is a challenging position, but so is mine, and we want to be compensated, and then you have math and English. So you just need to think about, we're going to need some time to look at that, and obviously, come to you with what we think we can do. My fear is if districts increase pay, so will those contracted companies, and they'll still be able to do what they do. The solution has got to be something along the lines of this, funding can't go to this, or something that's taken off of you and taken off of us and is handled at the state level. So there's definitely more and more conversations happening with this, and I'm going to help lead some of those this year. It is something I'm concerned about. So with that, I've shared with you what she wanted to, and I respect whatever decision.
I also feel that we need to get to the universities and try to get to the students that are graduating and explain to them that, you're going to be getting this. I know it's hard when you're 20 years old, you're not thinking about retirement, but have some of the retired teachers go back there and explain to them what the big difference is. And really, we need to attack these companies, because I think it's horrendous what they're doing.
I think one thing we can do also, that Kaylee and I have already been in conversation about, is finding a pathway for our current teachers to get SPED certified, and maybe the district can assist in some way legally to do that. And by doing that, they can, advance their pay and advance their education. So that is something we've been talking about for the last 6 months. It's just that of all of these certificates, it's the hardest one to get and the most time consuming too. And there's no emergency cert that I'm aware of when it comes to special ed.
And you have to have a passion for it.
You do.
Yes,
you do.
Those children are special, and they need somebody who's going to who's going to care for them.
And as
Dr.
a
Kowski?
district, I would love to see us, help them, pay it for part of their coursework, so they could do that if they're right here in our district.
That's something we want to look at.
Yeah.
Dr. Kowski?
Yeah, so looking at this school year, do we know, so this is the 121,512. Do we have a student that it will need this service this year? Do we know that?
Yeah, we have a classroom, I would say, based on last year, somewhere around 7 kids are in that classroom.
There's definite need. So if we don't find a teacher able to do this for this year, and it ends up going to Sierra Academy, what would be the equivalent cost at Sierra instead of 121.5?
A lot. You've seen the ones that you have is for 3 today, so you've seen the paperwork on the 3.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean they all would qualify for that. I want to be clear. What would most likely probably happen in some of the cases would be they may need to go back into regular classrooms with additional support. I don't have all I don't have their IEPs in front of me. I don't have all the answers to that.
Are we talking instead of 121, it'd be like 130, 150, 200?
Well, for
Maybe
the
just a
3 that are coming up for Sierra
It's
Academy,
168.
It's 168, which I have questions about that too.
Yeah.
So an extra 40,000 basically.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
But remember, there's levels of, there's different levels of placement with least restricted environment. So these are students that we can still service in our district. They're not at a point where they need a placement. So, Leah would just need to be creative and look at options.
Have there been any inquiries from teachers, or no?
No,
Is the job still posted?
yes. Yes.
What's it,
And
what's it posted, what are we offering with that position?
the salary schedule, what we,
Yeah.
Oh, so it would be the new teacher, so they'd be coming in at the
Well, it doesn't
57?
have to be a new
they
teacher.
don't have to be
Or they
new.
can come in with-
They can come in with up to 6 years'
Oh,
experience.
okay, and we,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Plus, there's a hard to fill.
There is
Right,
hard to fill, and
right.
that might be a quick solution is to look at, increasing the hard to fill
Right.
versus maybe the whole salary as a whole, like, because then you're saying, if you want to do this, especially if we offer a pathway, so I think it's a little bit more fair to say, yes, we're paying this person more, and because it's a hard to fill position, but we're offering you a pathway if you want to do that too, so go for that.
is the hard to fill scaled, or is it kind of one rate no matter what?
It's one rate based, I believe they're all the same depending, regardless of discipline.
Okay.
The problem is every teacher's gonna be hard to fill soon.
Yeah.
It just is in time.
I'm a huge fan of the pathways for our teachers to become
Yeah.
SLED qualified as well, because just in elementary, I've interacted with a lot of teachers that I know have that caring for their students, and so I think that if we incentivized and supported a pathway like that, we'd probably have some takers, and that could be helpful.
It doesn't help with this year because we can't be
Yeah.
without a classroom.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And special ed is not something that you play around with
yeah.
for the federal government at
Yeah.
all.
I hate to turn Leah down, but I'm actually going to make a motion that we table this and see what happens in July if we can actually get somebody. So I motion that we table the contract with Epic Special Education Staffing. Do I have a second on that? Okay, all in favor of tabling, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Nay.
Okay,
I'm
That-
sorry, Joe, who seconded the motion?
Madison did, so 3-1. And
Anyone and who is the name?
Lillian was the nay. But I would like to see what we can do over the next few weeks. Next up is the purchase over $100,000 for Sierra Academy. This is for out-of-district placement, special services for kids that we cannot service in our district. I have a question. Why is the transportation $27,000? Like, that's somebody's whole salary.
So I talked to Ray about that today,
Okay.
and the total, I believe the total for all the outside placement was 60,000, if I'm not mistaken. I asked Ray about that, and his recommendation was to go with their transportation. He is low on drivers with the EVIT routes, the sports routes, the fact that you see our marquees, we're advertising for drivers.
Right.
So anyone out there, please come out and drive. But he's saying when you look at the total cost of fuel, maintenance, drivers, the routes that we already run, his recommendation was to go with their transportation. And additionally, and I'm not saying it with these students, I don't know who I don't have their names here, but sometimes when you are transporting students with certain needs, sometimes the company will provide additional support in the vehicle and customize that transportation to their needs, which may be difficult for Ray to do. So it is a high cost, trust me, is the first thing I saw when I looked at it. But in our conversation with Ray, his recommendation was to go with the transportation of the company.
Thank you. Are there questions or comments regarding the Sierra Academy out-of-placement district, or district out-of-placement?
Are there alternative companies that can meet these needs, or is this?
There are some, and what we typically do, and I want to go back a minute, some of the students in our self-contained program, we've brought back from these places to try to save money and to, maybe they've met their goals there and it's time for them to come back to the district and give us an opportunity again. So some of that is why we have the self-contained program we have, because that didn't exist like it does now 2 years ago. We do look at different companies, but certain companies have expertise in certain areas of disability. And additionally, We do also, if there are competing companies that can service the student, we will also allow the parents to do a tour and make sure they feel comfortable with the school that they're sending them to. So that is something we do work with parents on. So they might tour Sierra Academy and the ACES and say, this is a better fit for our child. And yes, their cost could be a little bit different, but it's in their best interest for them to feel comfortable, and maybe they offer a part of the program that just fits their needs a little bit better. So yes, we do look at different companies, but typically there's only a few that do this kind of work.
So on here, like it's 180 days times 2, so there's actually 2 students that'll be going?
Yes.
That this cost encompasses?
Yes.
And in the information discussion, there's ProCare Therapy and the ACES, which are other companies that, so have the parents chosen Sierra Academy for
Yeah,
the
so
students?
Leah always, and I've seen her do this, and I've talked to her, before and after a meeting like that. She'll typically meet the family there, they'll do a tour together, and then they'll come back. Sometimes I've been in districts where they've said, this is your placement, and that's it. We could, that's something the district could do, but again, I think our ultimate goal is to make sure the kid is successful, and so, nothing's come to me where the cost is so significantly different. A lot of times it's pretty close. So she does meet with them, and although, sometimes we have to say this is the placement based on what we can and can't do, we try to make it where everyone on that IEP team feels this is the right place and everyone feels comfortable going.
Tyler, do we recoup any of this money from Medicaid, or, I mean, obviously, a special ed student doesn't get, we don't get $70,000 or $80,000 for a special ed student. So if we're paying $168,000 for 2 students, what does the government give us back?
Yeah, it depends on the service. I know Sierra Academy does have, because the individual who's providing the service to the student has to be licensed. Like there's certain certificates they have to even be able to be billed. I am aware, I don't know if it's ACES or Sierra, I can't remember off the top of my head, but I do report their services on Medicaid. Now, the reimbursement is not nowhere near this amount, but it is something to help offset the cost here.
One of the things we've been working on is trying to do an IGA with a neighboring district. So I've reached out to Cape Creek. Bill and I have had conversation, and he's gonna, take that back to his team and get back to me. I've reached out to Paradise Valley. I have not yet with Scottsdale, but I could. But a lot of times, Scottsdale's sending these kids to the same places, right? So sometimes the level of certification, the level of support they need, you just may not be able to do in a district. Some districts have those abilities. So we've begun those conversations. I think that, a small district like us pairing up makes a lot of sense, but I need them to also be on board with it.
Right. Yeah, our backs are kind of against the wall.
Yes.
$168,000 for 2 students, they obviously need the services, but it's very frustrating that special ed services are not funded properly, that we recoup any of that money, and yet, we still have to pay it out, and I want students to have the services that they need, but I don't think that's fair to the rest of the students in our district that so much is allocated, for special ed services when it takes away from the overall students.
Well, and if we have a self-contained class, what threshold is there where a student would leave a self-contained and go to a service like this? Like what services are we unable to provide?
It basically comes down to, we've done everything we can. We've provided every service, support, and they're just not having success. And so going to a specialty school where the whole school is designed for that can be beneficial. So like I said, we have a very strong self-contained high school program. It's been for many years one of the best in the state. And even at that level, we have some students who that's not the right fit, and they do go on. This has been a cost for the district for decades. I mean, there's nothing new here. We do this yearly. It's one of those things, being small, that you don't have a lot of options. Paradise Valley has Roadrunner School. They have a design school for this. So you can send a student to that school and they get the assistance that they need. The ACES has satellite campuses in PV schools now. Chris Alexander and I visited one at, I think it was Hidden Hills, and I talked to Dr. Bales about, is there any way we could partner? And they've moved away from some of that over the last couple of years as well. So it is something we're going to continue to try to do. The next step would probably be to try to see if Mesa or Scottsdale are interested in working with us.
So having the self-contained school, the self-contained class, had we approved the teacher, it still wouldn't have taken away from this. We still would
Not
have
these
had-
students,
Yeah, we
no.
still would have had to send these
We
two
still have
students
these
to Sierra
students that
Academy.
need special placement,
Yeah.
yes.
So we're talking about different students.
Right.
Yes.
Okay.
I totally have to share just a quick story, because there's a lady that lives in my neighborhood whose son goes to our district and is a special needs student. And I was in my house, but I had the screen door closed, and I heard him getting picked up one day just recently. And the lady that was picking him up was like, you have to see what he can do, talking to the mom. And she was like, okay, shake my hand. And then she's like, did you see that? He looked in my eyes. It was the sweetest thing ever. Our staff is unbelievable. So
That's
I just had to
awesome.
share that.
Okay, are there any other questions regarding Sierra Academy? Hearing none, do I have a motion?
Regrettably, but I move we approve the purchase over $100,000 to Sierra Academy.
And I'll regrettably second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
I'm going to abstain.
Okay, so 301.
3-0.
301. She
Okay.
abstained.
Oh, I'm sorry, my fault.
I'll take care of those.
I'm late, my fault.
Okay, next up is supplemental reading grades 8 through 12. They've requested Robinson Caruso. You were given a list of when the notifications were sent, how long it's been on display, and that no one stopped by to look at the book or sent any feedback. Are there any questions regarding Robinson Caruso?
I move we approve Robinson Crusoe.
I'll second.
I have a motion and a second. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Next up is the supplemental reading list for McDowell Mountain. Again, you were given the notification date, how long they were on display, and no one stopped to look at the books or voiced any concerns, and there are several books on that list. Are there-
Again, I move we approve the list of supplemental reading.
Do I have a second?
I'll second that too.
I have a motion and a second. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Next up is the Mystery Science Learning Aid. I'm so excited about
Oh,
this.
gosh, yeah.
And I just loved watching Mrs. Brooks present.
Yep.
So are there any questions or comments?
No, that was fantastic.
And it's very inexpensive, and I thank her
Yes.
and the team for finding this. So I would like to move that the board approve the Mystery Science Learning Aid.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Next up is the updated special education policies and procedures. Ms. Gleason presented this at our last meeting. Are there any questions or comments regarding the special ed policies and procedures handbook?
No, I think it's very comprehensive, and I'm very happy everything's laid out there.
Yes, she does a great job. She really does.
Fantastic.
And I'm sorry I couldn't approve her thing, but hopefully she can find someone. So
Yeah.
are there no questions? Do I have a motion?
I move we approve the updated special education policies and procedures.
Second.
I have a motion and second. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Next up is the resolution for sale of the vacant land. The first one is the Aurora Vista Drive. Dr. J?
Nothing else to add. I'm glad that we had evaluation and opportunity to see what is possible there.
Are there any questions or comments from the board?
And again, if we were to put it for sale, it's the same thing we did with last year, where we have a certain number of years to do it.
Yes.
Correct.
I think you have 20 years.
20 years, wasn't it?
I'll move that we approve the
Hold on,
resolution
can
for
you
sale.
wait just a second?
Oh,
So
sorry.
this is just to put it on
On the ballot.
to be
Yeah.
voted on, okay?
Correct.
Because I did, I attended one of the facilities use meetings, and I really appreciated that there was a group, 3 out of the 7, that wanted a little bit more discussion and wanted a little bit more input. And then I did have a question as a point of order, since you had brought up me making a comment there, and that if you're not part of the committee, we don't have a space in those meetings for a public comment.
And I've talked to Dr. J about
Okay.
that,
So when
that
we
in the
hold
future he'll have public
votes,
comments.
Okay. Because I think that those are, important, because in the end, out of the 7 on the committee, 3 of them voted to wait on it, and so I think that's important to know, and in the end, getting the community to be able to have public comment would be a better gauge of what the community wants.
I do want to share, though, that we did allow for people to comment, everybody.
That first meeting, yeah.
Yeah, and the second. And my understanding is that the reason the vote was what it was is, I do believe that at least some of those people wanted all 3 properties on there, not just 2. I don't think there's any opposition to selling the 2 that I'm aware of. But again, the choice was to, the reason I brought it that way was I do believe that saving some land for the future, whether it's to sell or to build, I think is responsible, and that's just the way I feel about it.
I guess my thought is just that in the end, if we're putting it to a vote with the community, it would be helpful to know where the community kind of is in general before spending, even though this is an election year, so we're kind of saving money doing it this year instead of another year. Because the last time, all 3 properties, it was obviously voted down, so it
No,
wasn't on
no,
there
we
last
never
time,
had it.
that's
Wasn't
right.
on there.
But in the end, we had, a decent amount of voice or opposition that was expressed, which I know we're not putting that piece of land on there, but in the end, I think that having some community feedback before going out for the election would have been helpful.
Well, and we're kind of limited with time because of everything has to be turned into the elections department. But the good thing is that even if it goes up, if it goes on the ballot and it gets approved, we've discussed that nothing will be sold without community input. So I really want the board to hold fast to that, and that those town hall meetings happen with Dr. J, that our community is given that chance to voice their concerns or ideas.
Thank you.
Okay, go ahead, Dr. Rakowski.
Okay, so I'll move that we approve the resolution for sale of the vacant land at 12055 North Arroyo Vista Drive.
I second.
I have a motion and a second. All in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed? Nay. So 3-1-0, Kristen.
And who,
Madison was a nay. And then next up is the resolution for the sale of vacant land on Aspen, same thing that we just discussed. Are there questions or comments on this specific piece? Hearing none, I move that the board, sorry, I lost my place. I move that the board, I motion that the board call for a special election to put the sale of the vacant land at 15680 North Aspen Drive on the ballot.
I'll second.
You
Dr.
can have
Rakowski, second.
You can have.
All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? 3-1-0. Next up is information discussion items, supplemental reading grades 8 through 12. They are requesting the Hunger Games. Again, these books will be, have they been on display, Krista?
Yes.
So, have we had anyone come in and look at them?
no. And no comments. Did I not answer?
You did, I just hadn't gotten there, so I was just
Okay.
asking.
Just making sure.
I'll try to keep going. So, there was a lot of paper. so-
Yeah, they have been on display. We sent out all the constant contact, all of that. No feedback. Nobody reached out. Nobody came to read the book. So,
Okay.
When
or
did they
look
go?
at the book.
They went on display April 18th, and they'll be done tomorrow, June
Okay.
19th.
Okay.
Are there any questions or comments regarding the Hunger Games? Okay, that will come back for a vote in August.
And others.
Purchase over $100,000 ProCare therapy. Dr. J?
Yes, Madam President, members of the board and guests. ProCare is the other contracted special education teacher that the interview team was recommending, will be placed at the high school. The teacher's strength is in math, which Leah shares is a needed area within the special ed department. She shares that finding high school special ed teachers are extremely difficult to find. So that's her comments tonight. This is now more of what we see as, a special ed teacher that is resource or is co-teaching, not working in a self-contained environment. So with that, I'll take any questions you have.
And again, this is just information discussion. My
Sure.
feeling is the same as it was on the last teacher. I would like our staff to continue to do interviews and see if we can find someone that would work just for the district. Or maybe, figure out some creative thinking. So.
Well, and when you say that they're a resource or co-teacher, does that mean that they will for sure have someone else in there, or could they be on their own?
So a lot of students who have, like, say, special ed services for math, sometimes they'll be in a classroom for math with a teacher like this who is highly qualified. This would be, a lot of times it's pull out for math, so they'll have a special classroom they go to with that teacher for that period of the day. Other times, the teacher could push in to the classroom and co-teach and work with students that way. And then also, a lot of times, there's a study skills class or resource class where they might get executive functioning services or their goals there are being met. And so this is more of what you think of as, when you think of a special ed teacher in a classroom, they're doing those types of services. Whereas the other one is very specific to self-contained.
Any questions or comments regarding ProCare therapy? Okay, hearing none. The next one is the ACES. Again, this is for out-of-district placement for tuition and counseling for 3 students, including their transportation at $61,000 this time for transportation. So 3 students will cost us $190,674.
So these are like specialty schools that we then pay the tuition for because we could not supply the services? Is this what they
Yes.
charge like if I just went there as a parent, is this what they would charge me?
Yep. It's the same across all districts.
So they don't work with like public schools to give any kind, there's no
They
discount
typically
for
only,
another educational entity or
yeah,
anything?
they're, almost all their kids are from all over. I mean, like I said, Paradise Valley District had a satellite at one of their campuses because the number of students they send there, it made sense in one of their campuses with low enrollment is to have it there. The problem with our location is it's really far out of the way for a lot of districts. So that's probably not an option, even though, we have space. So these are, again, we do not get to this point quickly. This is a long process of, making sure you're doing everything you can to maintain that least restrictive environment. So this is where you get to a point where this is not working. The parent obviously needs additional assistance, and the IEP team is the one who decides that placement.
So
And this is what
between-
happens, it's a public school. That's where a lot of our funds end up going, where people don't realize.
Right,
that it isn't just-
358,000 will be 5 students.
Yeah, exactly. It's not something that, we can say to the legislature, you're going and cutting our funding and look at what happens.
Yeah, so out of our $10 million budget,
Right.
358,000 is just for 5
It's just
students.
for 5 students.
Tyler,
Exactly.
isn't there some high costs that we get back for students in that? Can you explain that?
Weighted APM
High cost
when
child?
there's-
Yeah, so your group
Yeah.
B weights,
Or
for these
504s.
sped students, there's an additional group B weight,
Yes.
depending on the disability, and it can be upwards of 6 times the base level support, so 6 times that $5,000
So
amount.
30,000.
But
Yeah,
it's still
it
not.
still does not
It still
equate
doesn't
to
come anywhere close.
the amount to contract out services with these
Mhm.
students.
So, but still, even if it was 30,000 times 5 students, that's 150,000 that we would recoup out of the 358,000.
There's also some Medicaid reimbursement for eligible services, so
Mhm.
we can,
Is it possible to give us like a breakdown, like if you just use, not now, but can you send something to the board, like just a generic student, like just pick one and give us some idea of what the reimbursement would be from
that
the
one
state?
student, yeah. I can try my best.
It doesn't have to be complete, I mean,
Yeah.
just give us an idea,
Yeah.
so.
Leah can probably help. So Leah's
Yeah.
done a good job of ensuring that she's getting that high-cost child, information there and that. So I think a combination of the two of them can try to put something together.
I think it would just be easier to make these decisions
Yeah.
if we knew that there's some sort of reimbursement. And, I mean, we're still gonna make the decision, what's in the best interest of the child, that if these children need out-of-district placement, we're gonna do that. But we also need to see that, how we're budgeting that, so.
And we've looked at the self-contained as like on our own, but sometimes specific disability might require a specific classroom. So even if we had, say, 3 or 4 students that we could do that with, by the time you add in the amount of parapros that need to be in there, resources, equipment, teachers, a lot of times for us being alone, that savings may not be great.
Right.
And it may be very, 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 very difficult to get that person in the first place. So again, go back to, can we IGA with somebody else and try to work that out? I will continue to make that, like I said, I'm going to be speaking a lot on the contracted this year.
Yeah.
But also, while doing that, say, who in the room wants to help me?
Right, yeah.
Right.
So we will definitely try, but this is one, again, where we're going to need to support these kids one way or another.
Absolutely,
Yeah.
but when we're making decisions on teacher contracts that, $121,000 for a special ed teacher, we're not getting any reimbursement back on that. But, it would just be nice to know like the overall picture of what we're looking at. I think it would just be easier to make these decisions, so.
Yep.
Thank you. Okay, next up is the ESA students in sports. This has come before the board several times. I just, I want to bring it back for a vote in our first meeting in August. But I wanted to share some information that I've gotten from other districts. And again, it's kind of like when I first presented the information, like, what's working in one isn't necessarily working in the other. So I've spoken to a few different districts, everyone from their athletic director to their board members to their superintendent. And basically, one of the things that I found is there are 3 different types of students, basically. So there are students that are homeschooled, and we have to provide the ability for them to play in our sports. That's its own entity. Then there are 2 different types of ESA students. There are ESA students who are now homeschool students, that their family actually homeschools them. And then there's ESA students that are online charter school students. So the online charter school students are their own entity, and that is not necessarily, it doesn't fall under what our board has been talking about. So I'm kind of just focusing on the ESA students who are homeschool students. And so when I've talked to these different districts, they, one of the things that they said that I heard from a few different ones is kind of what Madison has said is, hey, maybe it'll help bring back students into our district. They flat out said that never happened. So that unfortunately, they did not recoup the students that had left the district. And so most of the districts that I talked to only have anywhere from 1 to 8 ESA students, voucher students playing in their district. So it's minimal. Some of the districts charge nothing for their own students to play sports, but they're charging a high rate, which would be Mesa. Mesa does not charge any athletic fee to their own high school students, but they are charging $2,000 to the ESA voucher students. And then other districts are charging the same as what they're charging their own enrolled students. Nobody seemed to, or at least not that I got a lot of information on, seemed to have much information on how you keep these kids how you keep track of the eligibility of these students. And so that was kind of a concern, that has been raised. My other question, and Kane or Krista, I would like you to find out, is that if these students are playing in our district and they are on, at an athletic event and there's behavior issue or something happens, they get hurt, they create a ruckus, whatever, how does the trust handle the liability for that when they're technically not our student? And so that was another question that I had asked a couple different districts, and nobody seemed to have the answer for that. Although I am so thankful for the districts that talked, because it did provide a lot of insight. I also heard back from some students and some parents. Some of our student athletes have said that they would have issues playing with a student that didn't go to our school if they were not held to the same eligibility and the same behavioral contract and the same attendance contract. So that was an issue. And then the other thing is, what stops our kids from saying, well, fine, I'll become an ESA voucher student. Sports was the only thing keeping me in school. And so now that I can play if I'm an ESA voucher student, I will just take the voucher money and basically sit at home, and then I'll just come back and play sports. So that was, I talked to the different districts about that. So those are the questions that I've asked, and just wanted to give that information to the board. So.
Yeah, and I just want to share, I also spoke with some coaches and students and received a similar type of response from them, that they had concerns. Now, it wasn't anything like formal, like a survey of everybody, but it was certainly just in conversations I've had. One thing that was concerning this year, and it got brought up at a coffee session, was the amount of students who were switching to online this year, and how easy it was to do that. And so it's something I've challenged Ms. Pinto coming in with, and it's not any knock to the high school. It's, they're trying to help kids get where they want to be and be successful. And sometimes it's credit recovery. There's a lot of instances to it, but my point is that we have had a lot of kids want to move to online to, not have that, structure of maybe school every day. And I do have the same concern that if sports is something that, like, for example, we have our 6th period, a lot of sports courses now, sports-related courses, and they're not there for those. And then, the kids are coming a lot of times to school. Sports is a big draw for them, and if it's no longer required to be a student here, I do think we would see some withdrawals. The other thing that came up in my research is, we've had in public comment several times Payson mentioned, so I did some research there. And one of the things that Payson's finance director shared with their board is that through, going through all their finances, looking at everything that goes from the budget into athletics, she estimated that each athlete that plays a sport costs the district $2,100 for that participation. And so when you think about that, you're thinking about transportation costs. We already know John estimated $60,000 this last year. You're talking, capital costs of uniforms and equipment. You're talking about coaching, personnel costs. Those are all things. But one of the other things that comes up is we still have costs on the facilities every year that's sometimes overlooked. Like the football field still cost us $75,000 last year. The gymnasium in the middle school, high school campus cost us $45,000. We have scoreboards that are going to need to be repaired and replaced this summer, $16,000. So those are all costs that are non-academic. And so when you look at that number of $2,100, and Payson's a district similar in size, they're a little bigger than us, but similar in size, you start looking at that, and if you're getting no funding from the state now, and it actually costs that kind of an amount, the concern I have is, you've seen our budget, you've seen it's really razor tight. My concern is that adding that in would be a concern. My other concern is that this is all relatively new, And I would almost ask that we take time to see a year from now, 2 years from now, where we're at with this. It did make it through the budget this year, as we saw. It is continuing, but it's so new, and there's so many things that are going to be coming up over the next year. And some of the districts I spoke to initially passed it, and then their boards rescinded it after they saw the effects of it. So being that we're small and that we have a very tight budget, and looking at how much goes into athletics, that's a concern that I have.
Yeah, and I just read an article, I think it was in AZ Central, that said that the majority of ESA vouchers are being used in affluent districts.
Yes.
They're being used to basically supplement the tuition to go to private school that those parents were already paying. And so if our board chooses to move forward with this, I would like to really narrow down whether we're allowing all ESA voucher kids to play, or is it just the ESA homeschool voucher students? So these are just some things to think about. You know, it keeps getting pushed off because I really was trying to gather as much information as possible. And I think that I've talked to, you know, as many people as I possibly can to kind of get their opinion. And some districts, it seems to be okay. That seems to be the larger districts. I talked to some districts that, smaller districts like us, that did put it out and then rescinded it. The other concern that students and parents have raised with me, and then I also heard from one of the small districts that I talked to, was about students getting cut. If you allow the ESA voucher students to play, then we would have to have something in a policy that basically said that our actual Fountain Hills students that are enrolled in our district did not get cut, because that was a concern of, we've always advertised that this is a great school to play sports, that you can, be a multi-sport athlete, but if all of a sudden our own kids are getting cut from teams because there's, other students coming in, then that kind of depletes why we keep kids here. So.
And I understand where you're coming from. And I do, having 3 kids in the district and playing multiple sports. I would say also, though, my only concern with a policy like that is the challenge of that in a court and it becoming a lawsuit, because, it makes it, and it kind of takes away from that opportunity to try out now, because I'm already at a disadvantage if I'm in that situation. And that's why I say I just think there's too little information on this at this time to make a decision like that that can affect. We don't know what the effect is going to be down the road, and I would just caution about making a decision this early in such a new program, that we just don't know how it's going to be funded or what it's going to look like down the road. And with our budgetary concerns, I just have a lot of concerns.
I disagree. I have a lot to say, because I think that, to me, this was an easy choice. When you read even the ASBA magazine, which I already brought up, completely demonized ESA, and not very well, to be honest. But even they state in here, as of now, we know a substantial number of those students have no prior affiliation with the public school system. Meaning, all of this money, they're now taking from the general education fund. I was surprised when Wendy made a comment against ESAs, because I remember when Wendy spoke to the Liberal ladies, she talked about how important it was for people to use things like tax credits, where they can speak using their dollars and say, hey, government, we want this money to go to education. We want this money to go to education. This is a way where, for example, my 2 kids, the district is not getting a single dollar from my 2 kids because I homeschool them. However, if I was to go and sign up for the ESA program, I would take money from the general tax fund, again, not from public education, and now I would have that money to spend on education resources, including from our district, if we would open that door. I think that's great. To speak to the wear and tear on our facilities, I don't believe that 1 to 8 ESA students, which is what the number that Jill quoted, would make that much of a difference on our facilities. We're having to pay that maintenance anyway, allowing 1 to 8 students who would be paying an increased rate, because I do think that that's fair, I don't think would increase the wear and tear. When it comes to eligibility, we're not held accountable for that, and that's where you could argue that it would increase our cost negatively. We're not responsible for their education, but now we're going to be adding personnel that need to oversee their grades or review material or whatever. So I think that that's,
But
again,
AIA holds us accountable for that.
and when the parents sign to take over the kid's education, they take accountability for that. So there could be somewhere in our policy for ESA students that the parent is fully accepting that commitment and that responsibility. And I think that we could also mitigate our risk with not only the liability, that could be something we don't even have to transport ESA students if we wanted to make things difficult or to just say we don't want that liability. You know, ESA students were responsible for their own transportation and for all additional things. And we could even do that with we don't want our Fountain Hill students to not have an opportunity. The way to mitigate that would say a certain percentage of the teams, which is already required, has to be made up of our Fountain Hill students, because one of the only main concerns that I could see is recruiting. We wouldn't want recruiting to happen. And so we would need to have, I think that it would be important to say that they acknowledge that they're homeschooled, not enrolled somewhere else, because I think that we don't want people coming from private schools or things like that to come and take advantage of our small athletic where people can really shine. But I think that really there's no concern here to me that would make it such an easy no. To me, it's an easier yes, because we're not getting that money already. We have people that want to come and participate in our athletics and give us money to do it. I think that we could charge a slightly increased rate, I think maybe 50% more than we're charging our families, and then have those additional expectations. We can have it more strict for behavior. Our students have to sign behavior agreements anyway. So to me, I think that there's a way to.
If you charge only
Make it
50%
comfortable.
more, that only puts them at $300, and Mesa's charging $3,000, or $2,000.
Well,
But and I understand what you're saying about the transportation, but the trust actually, I mean, it's not just the transportation, it's what happens if they punch a kid, while they're on the field, or they trip and break their ankle, and like there's other liability there. It's not just the transportation, and that's where I would like clarification from the trustee.
Yeah, and I just want to clarify, I'm not saying that 1 to 8 kids is causing wear and tear in the facility. That's not my point. My point is that for every student we get roughly $5,000 for them. And so if 2,100 of that, if Payson's numbers are pretty accurate to ours, is going to a kid who plays a sport, then that just shows you how much athletics costs our district. So when we're already taking a loss on that, and it's already a very challenge, and you can't not have it, right? You're not going to have any enrollment if you don't have athletics. So I'm just saying is adding one more layer of less funding is just a concern when you're already in, because I've heard it the other way, like, hey, we have funding issues and we shouldn't be doing this and we shouldn't be doing that, like we shouldn't be in Guppy Mac or this or that because we don't have the funding for that. It's the same thing the other way, is what I'm saying is you already have a funding with athletics that is an issue, and now you're bringing in, what if we have 30? We don't know the number, so what I'm saying is, if 30 kids come out, now you're talking about an additional team maybe in some sports, an additional cost, and if you're not getting any money from the state for that, and it's $2,100 a kid to play a sport, and you add 30 kids, now you're talking about a pretty high number in a budget that already is very, very tight. That's all I want to clarify. It's not that one kid's going to cause the gym to crumble. I want to make sure that's not my point. My point is it's already a tight budget.
And what I want to say, for me, it's a very easy no. Because you may think that, we don't get the money. Exactly. Those parents were sending their kids to a private school because they had the money to do that. By doing that, we have less money. This year, we already know that things have been cut from the budget. We don't know what's going to happen next year because I know things were promised that hopefully they can go through ESAs. It has cost a fortune to the legislature, in which case the first thing they do is cut education. They cut the money that we get. So we are definitely getting less money.
No,
Yeah.
not the education system.
Oh,
It says
please.
right here in ASBA.
No, you're
This
reading
would
it
bring the
completely wrong.
No, this would
Okay.
bring the total cost to $824.5 million in general fund dollars. So all of the money, like right now, like I said, my kids are not on ESAs. If I went and signed up for ESAs, I would get money from the state government that is sitting in general tax dollars that I could then spend on education, and the government would have a record of it saying, oh, this is another $7,000 that someone pulled from our general tax dollars and put towards education, not in our public education system. To me, it's a great way for people who have already not been trusting and not been partaking of the public education system to say, you're failing right now, I'm gonna take this money and I'm gonna spend it where I feel it's best spent, which I would hope is still here. I would bring my kids here for extracurricular activities, and I know that there's other people in our community that would. And so that's why I think it's an easy yes. It doesn't hurt our education dollars at all. If anything, it communicates to the legislatures that they need to allocate more money towards education and that they need to, clean up our education system in general. Because like I said, most of the people on ESAs never were partaking of public education already, meaning the public education system got $0 for those people, really.
But the tax money goes to education.
General fund dollars.
Correct, it goes to education, it goes to the police, it goes to the fire department.
It's similar to the allocation. Here, we allocate money for this. If that's no longer here, that money goes back into a general tax fund. So all of the tax fund that is allocated towards public education is based off of ADM, is based off of numbers. So those, let's just say 500 students that are on ESAs that were not in public education system. No, we didn't get a single dollar for any of those kids. That was sitting in the general tax fund, not public education. So you have to stop confusing those two, because in the end, ESA does not hurt public education. The only way that it hurts public education is by adding a level of competition that now people who didn't have resources to go and spend on private education to still say, you know what, the public education system is not good enough.
It
I
is killing
get-
public
but-
education, so
Madison,
and
I-
we're not
public
gonna get in
education
an
is eating
argument
itself
because
by
when you don't
funding
understand
programs and
exactly
not
how things
focusing on
go, it's
education.
very hard to discuss it. So
I
we're
do
gonna
want to,
not see eye to eye on this at all, so.
yeah, I
there's
do
nothing
want
I
to
can
add
do.
though that athletics can be a draw though for a school. I mean, you see it all the time. I mean, you have kids transfer to different schools and schools are, having success and people want to come there. So when you're looking at enrollment and you're trying to grow enrollment, one of the ways to do that is by offering these kind of programs. I do have concern though, and I've always been, as a leader, someone who wants to make sure our students feel supported and listened to. I do think that there needs to be some more discussion with our students about this because, them and the coaches are the ones that pay. I can tell you right now, as a coach, having a student not ride the bus with me would be a concern. There's team building that goes on there. Those
I
team
didn't know that
dinners.
was allowable.
Well, we allow some we allow some
Okay.
students to get permission
Okay.
to drive.
They can fill, their parent
But I'm just
can
saying
fill
is
out a
that
permission
it can
slip.
cause some division among teams, and when you're coaching at a high level, you're looking at every opportunity with your team as a way to do that. And so I think getting some feedback from our students and from our coaches and our teachers is something that really we need to do, because again, everything we do should be student-focused. And that's why I
I
had.
agree, but then we have to have the same attitude towards these students that we couldn't help, that we have to outsource and pay their tuition in other schools. We have to have the same attitude with people who have just, they're not taking advantage of us that way, where they're saying, hey, pay our tuition somewhere else. They're saying, hey, we're taking care of the tuition, we're teaching our kids, we're figuring it out, we just want to participate in sports. To me, I think we have to have the same attitude towards our homeschooling families as we do to these other families that need public education services, maybe not fully here, but
But
want to
that's
It's
special
apples and oranges.
education.
But
It's
what I'm
different.
saying is, we're not legally required to give athletic opportunities to students in
No,
our
well, what I'm
town.
saying is.
But in
let's-
the end, we should
yeah.
have the same attitude towards those students and say, of course we want you to participate in our athletics department. I think that we should draw a line at if they're attending another school, if they're attending.
They can't do that.
Exactly. So
That's an
then-
AI violation. So I really do think, and like I said,
hold
all my
on.
leadership has been
Back
talk
up.
to the kids. Yeah.
I'm going to disagree with you.
Okay.
They can't attend an actual physical school, but AIA does have a bylaw where they can attend a charter school, an online charter school, and they can still participate in your sports programs. And the governing board, that's going to come to the governing board in August, because we need to vote whether that's going to happen too. There's a new AIA bylaw.
And so to me,
on that.
that's a little
Right,
bit
but
more
what I'm
stretched
saying
than
is-
what ESA homeschooled students.
But you can't, with the ESAs, they have, my understanding in the conversation I have is they have to live in your attendance boundary.
They do,
If
no
not-
matter what.
No matter what.
They
Because
have to
then-
live within our
Because
boundary.
if, the only other way they could play in our attendance boundary is to open enroll into our school
Right.
and then sit if they've played that sport. So, again, like I said, I'm just giving feedback, and I'm a strong believer in student input.
I just have one comment with the students. When it comes to feeling that out, I think it's gonna be very important that the leader, that you lead with an open mind, because in the end, if we come at it with an attitude where these kids aren't gonna be held to the same eligibility, these kids aren't gonna be having, then they'll feel that way. Whereas I think that if they met a kid, Renee's son, for example, if they met him on was it track that is baseball? If they met him and they were practicing with him, they wouldn't look at him and say, well, he's not held to the same standard as me. No, they'd probably just be like, oh, he's a fun kid to play with. In the end, I think that we need to make sure that if we're going to the students for feedback, that we are not bringing any kind of attitude or feelings
No, we
with
share
it.
the facts and let them give us feedback.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, well, I will have this come back to the board August 21st. That's our second meeting in August. We've debated this back and forth. I've given you all the information that I've collected from the Arizona Department of Education, AIA, and now I've told you what I found in other districts, so.
Thank you,
I-
Brian.
You're welcome. I would like to bring it back to the board, so I will bring it back August 21st. So Dr. J, that gives you, a couple weeks going into school if you want to reenact your principal committee or your superintendent committee and see, some feedback, that'll give a few weeks, but I don't want to keep pushing this down the road, so.
Is that as an action item?
It will come back as an action item, so the board will have a choice to vote yes, no, or to table it and get more information.
So
Okay?
it would be an action item, and then we would draft a policy after that, correct, if we decide?
Right,
at
if the
that
board
time?
wants to
Okay.
move forward, then we would have to look at a policy and,
All that
there would
stuff.
still be a lot of things. So if we approve this on August 21st, it's not like a child can sign up on the 22nd.
Yeah.
Like, it's still going to take time. But at least then we'll know, is the majority of the board for it? Is the majority of the board against it? Or do we want more information and it's been tabled? So that, it'll give direction on how we're moving forward, okay? So with that, the next thing is special education presentation and future action. I'm giving Ms. Gleason some time to kind of get all her stuff together, and then sometime this fall, we'll look at doing that. And then Dr. Rakowski, you said you had something?
Yeah, and then my request with that is, since we talked earlier about potentially thinking about offering stipends or reimbursement for our own teachers to do this, would that be appropriate to put that in presentation, or
Sure.
consider that as, because we'd have to have a policy to do that,
Right,
right? So I'd like to pursue that.
okay. Okay, perfect. And like I said, that'll come back this fall because it's summertime and she's trying to get all her stuff ready for the start of the school year. So I don't want to add more to her plate. Okay, dates of upcoming meetings are, we'll actually
Can
have,
I say a couple of things that I would like to hear?
for future action?
For future, yes.
Okay,
I would like us to maybe go to the schools and get information at the beginning of the year of testing and end of year. If we could just, it doesn't have to be the board meeting like this, if we could have some time to go and just talk about what's going on.
Maybe do like a site tour to check in and just see
Yeah,
how things are
different
going.
sites, and also I really want somebody to come here and talk about the Holocaust education, if it's being done here and what years it's being done,
Yeah,
because
Chris
I know.
Alexander filled everything out. We can
Yeah.
put that together. Are you talking about, like, do you want to join our new teacher tour to all the sites, or do you want to do it once kids are back in session,
For which one?
to visit the sites?
For-
No, it's not necessarily visiting the sites, what I really want is to get testing data.
Oh, like,
Yeah.
so like the
Building.
benchmark?
no, you're talking about ASA and ACT data? Yeah.
Yes,
Yeah, we can
yes.
do that. Yep.
Yeah, we can do.
So no board site tour.
No, she wants testing
No.
data.
Testing data.
Okay.
And you want that on future action? Or-
Whenever there's information on testing data,
You
like
just want
if we
it
were to
submitted?
do it, no, I would love to sit in the school when they're analyzing the
Okay, then that
testing
wouldn't be a
data.
future action item. This is
Right.
for the board at the board meeting. That's,
Okay.
so,
So I can set up, if we're having a data meeting, and invite the board to that.
Yes,
Right.
Yeah, okay.
that would be
So
good.
We can do that instead, yes.
Okay.
But the Holocaust education, I really would like to.
Yeah,
find
I
out
can put
what's
that
going
together.
on.
Chris, like I said, the state had required what we do.
Yes.
That is, I believe, published under our letter grade, but I can do a
Yeah,
presentation on that.
because I know that they're showing different dates and different years where you're supposed to be educating things,
Yeah.
and things are coming down the pipeline on
Yeah,
that.
we can do that.
so special education / stipends for special ed teachers, and then Holocaust education will be those two. Okay. Anything else? Okay, hearing none. Dates of upcoming meetings, our first one will be August 7th. Yay, we have July off. And August 21st, both at 6 o'clock here in the Learning Center. And with that,
Move we adjourn.
I second.
I have a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed? Motion carries. I have some stuff you guys need to sign. Krista, what is this?
That is for the special education handbook.
Oh, okay.
Just signing your portion of it.
So that's for the special ed handbook. I'll give you the budget. I do not, here.
A slew of
Totally unprepared.
Okay. Okay. And then that's the minutes